Good evening. Today is May 8th, 2023. It is 7 o'clock. We're in the Genoa Township Hall. Our agenda items this evening are election of officers and then zoning case 2022-06, Mira Luna, Romanelli and Hughes, the fifth meeting. Staff present this evening, Joe Schaefer, Director of Development and Zoning, Paul Benson, Deputy Zoning Director. Mr. Schaefer, roll.
Roll call, Mr. Bernhardt.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Here.
Mr. Leff.
Here.
Ms. Walsh.
Present.
Mr. Welch.
Here.
Now note Mr. Sears and Mr. Wester here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Our statement of policy, this meeting may be recorded. Such recordings are public record, may be posted online, and could be subject to review in court. As is the adopted policy of the Zoning Commission, all applicants will be granted an opportunity to make their formal presentation. The audience may then be granted an opportunity to comment, followed by the applicant's response and questions from the commission. The chairperson may limit repetitive debate and reserves their following rights: to limit comment to items on the agenda, to limit public comment to 5 minutes per person, to restrict the number of times a member of public is permitted to speak, and to enact any other reasonable ad hoc protocols or measures necessary to maintain a fair, safe, and orderly meeting. This policy was adopted by the commission to provide for the respectful, constructive, and efficient discussion of business scheduled for consideration and to allow for proper due process as required by law. First item up is the minutes from the last meeting. Any motion or discussion?
I was not here, so I won't make a motion. I move to approve the April 11, 2023 meeting minutes as presented.
I second.
Discussion? Roll.
Roll call, Mr. Bernhardt.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
I'll abstain.
Mr. Leff.
Yes, motion passes. Second item on the agenda, and bear with us, please, because we need to do a reorg, is the vote of our election of officers. We'll flip to the last 2 pages. And so at this time, we have.
Chair, I would nominate David Leff as Chair of the Zoning Commission for the ensuing year.
I second the motion.
Discussion, questions? Any other nominations? Mr. Schaefer?
Roll call, Mr. Bernhardt.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Abstain. Motion passes. Thank you. Appreciate that. We have a nomination for vice chair.
Sure, I don't care.
I move Porter Chip Welch to be vice chair.
I will second that. Discussion? Any other nominations? Mr. Schaefer?
Roll call, Mr. Bernhardt.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
I'll abstain.
Mr. Leff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Extra pay?
All right.
Elections or nominations?
I would say they were both.
They are both, okay. Sounds good.
Do we need to do both?
Yeah,
Do we need to do?
I move that we accept the slate as presented.
I'll second that.
Mr. Schaefer?
Roll call, Mr. Bernhardt. Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Yes. There, now we've taken care of that. The time is now 7:03 PM. Romanelli and Hughes Building Company requesting approval of a rezoning and preliminary development plan to construct 166 single-family dwellings on approximately 129.5 acres, generally located west of Rome Corners Road, including 3570 Rome Corners Road, pin 317-210-050-03000, 3774 Rome Corners Road, pin 317-210-050-08000, and 317-210-050-09000, 3912 Rome Corners Road, pin 317-210-050-09001, and 3990 Rome Corners Road, pin 3172-100-501-0000. Currently zoned rural residential RR, seeking rezoning to planned residential district, PRD, also known as Mira Luna, zoning case 2022-06, the continued meeting from April 11th, 2023. Anybody speaking tonight thinking they might speak or give testimony, please rise and raise your right hand. If you feel you may speak, I would go ahead and stand and raise your hand. Everybody up? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Be seated. The following exhibits were either updated or added. Exhibit F, the staff technical review dated April 1st, 2023 for April 8th, 2023. Exhibit G, staff memo dated April 1st, 2023 for April 8th, 2023. Exhibit H, all public comments received between September 16th of 2022 and April 8th, 2023. Exhibit I, the traffic study dated April 21st, 2023 and approved by the Delaware County Engineer May 5, 2023. Mr. Schaefer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into my review, I guess want to note for the record, at the January meeting, Mr. Carter wasn't present. I guess, Mr. Carter, you familiarized yourself with all of the testimony?
Yes, I listened to everything and all the testimony and read everything.
Okay,
absolutely.
good. Thank you. Sorry, I meant to put that prompt in the script, but we forgot, so I want to make sure we got that on the record.
For touching base with me.
Okay, so diving right in, since this is our, I guess, third actual meeting with testimony, as per the previous meeting, I'm just going to focus on the changes and revisions. Mr. Benson's working on getting the plan pulled up right now. So as you noted in the legal description, there have been some changes yet again to the plan, so I'm going to get right to it. The acreage has been refined. The tract size overall, it's still the same general tract, just the technically exact acreage has now been refined from 130.15 acres down to 129.5. Staff presumes that's probably part surveying and or part just accounting for the right-of-way that they have to dedicate for the county. The number of units continues to decrease. This proposal is now at 166 proposed single-family dwelling units. So we're down another handful of units from the last iteration, and that'd be broken down into 87 of the empty nester product units with 62-foot wide typical lots, and 79 of the 80-plus foot traditional single-family lots, and all lots would be fee simple. So no condominium regime here, at least not in terms of how the property is owned. I believe there's some maintenance common agreements going on there for the fee simple portion. As we've noted sort of before, any of the zoning resolution amendments that have been passed since this application was filed last September would not be applicable to this proposal. That means the Hoover watershed overlay does not apply here. And similarly, the amendments that the trustees passed a week or two ago, incorporating the new density recommendations we voted on a while back in February, would similarly not apply to this. The same story goes for the comprehensive plan. I have talked to council, and even though the comprehensive plan goes into effect immediately, this, unlike the zoning resolution amendments where we have to wait 30 days, which technically won't go into effect until May 20th, I've still been advised that we are operating under the comprehensive plan that existed at the time this application was filed, since the comp plan and the zoning resolution work in tandem with one another. And then we've already discussed the applicant has requested a divergence to move forward with both of those documents being applicable to the final plans. That divergence already existed, so nothing really has changed there other than the fact that we've, again, amended the zoning code. So diving further in, the plan, as you know, is broken into two sub-areas. The acreage and the breakdown of units for each of those sub-areas has changed. Sub-area A is the northern half of the development, consisting of the 87 empty nester product homes. It's approximately 65.96 acres in size. Sub-area B is approximately 63.54 acres in size and consists of the traditional single-family homes. In terms of phasing, so there's a difference. There's sub-area and then there's phasing. And I'm not sure exactly, I think the differences between the unit type and possibly maybe how some of the stormwater is working. But the phases are broken down for the plan into 3 phases. There we go, there's the color-coded version. So you can see how the infrastructure and the homes would all be built out and developed. So phase 1 consists of 3 non-contiguous areas totaling 58 homes, which would be 29 of the empty nester products and then 29 of the traditional product. And it also includes the northern and southernmost park spaces, the 3 ponds, and both Rome Corners Roads plan entrances. And this was something the applicant had to work a little bit on the phasing here, not only to meet their needs, but also there was needs from the fire department end. As you can see with sort of phase two, when they built phase one, each of those phases are separate off of Rome Corners Road, and we're under the 30-unit threshold. But when phase two comes online, which consists of 49 homes, 25 which are empty nester, and 24 which are the traditional lots, they had to build that road network to make sure that both phase ones connect to each other, to making sure that they satisfy the fire department requirement that they have two ways in and out of the plan. Phase two would also contain the stub road to the west as required by, sorry, I'm reading that wrong section. The stub road is actually part of phase three, as I can see on this drawing here. But you can see some of the open space amenities are also part of the phase two plan. And then phase three, which is, again, more non-contiguous areas, filling out the balance of the development. 59 homes, 33 which are of the empty nester product, 26 are which of the traditional family product, the westernmost park space, and obviously the balance of the road network. The developer anticipates this will take 3 to 5 years to complete the build-out of the plan once construction has actually started. Obviously, that doesn't factor in any time they need to get final plan approvals from us, as well as all the engineering and plating approvals from the county. So here's the synopsis of the major revisions of the plan that I haven't already covered. We've already discussed acreage. We've already discussed the unit reduction. With the unit reduction by 19 homes, obviously comes a change in the density. So the proposed net density has been reduced from 1.789 units per net developable acre to 1.614 units per net developable acre. And obviously, this is an overall substantial decrease from the very original proposal we saw last fall. We're down 65 lots compared to where we were when this initially was applied for. Oddly enough, because of the drop in acreage and all the other changes that happened, the net density change from the very original application and this application is not terribly substantial. We went from 1.623 to 1.614. The stub road to the west has been provided as a requirement by Delaware County. I'm sure if the applicant didn't have to build that stub road, they probably wouldn't, but that's a county requirement. Usually they look for road to enhance road connectivity through development, so we don't push traffic all out on the main roads to go from one plan to another. They always like to make sure they've planned for connectivity between future neighborhoods. Despite how likely or unlikely that larger tract to the west is to develop, or the manner in which it's to develop, it's just a good sound planning practice. The streetscape treatments along the main entrance into the plan have been removed. The proposed central green space and shelter concept has been updated with now 3 total park spaces, each with its own unique theme and design, which is sort of a nice touch, something we haven't really seen before that I can recall. Cluster mailbox units are now identified on the plan, and the phase lines and unit counts have obviously been adjusted to accommodate the latest layout. So getting into the nuts and bolts of the numbers, we've already talked acreage and unit counts. Open space-wise, the plan, they are utilizing the conservation development standards now, which requires 50% open space, but under the zoning resolution this was applied for also would allow their density to go up to 2.2 units per net developable acre, as well as a lot more flexibility regarding lot size and setback requirements. So with the open space, they are proposing 50.1%, otherwise translates out to 64.94 acres of open space in the site. As far as, there was some concerns regarding the setbacks from primary conservation areas like the wetlands and the stormwater basins on the plans we had received a few weeks ago, the revisions we received today, and yes, for those of you in the audience, we were receiving changes and revisions of this plan up to this afternoon that staff has been working on reviewing. In fact, I had to update this memo at about 4 p.m. today. But they have made that change and have shown that all the development is maintaining that 20-foot buffer setback from the wetlands that aren't being mitigated elsewhere, as well as the stormwater ponds. I did have a note in the updated technical review. I would like to see the exact, if this plan were to proceed to final, I would like to see the actual exact measurements on the final development plans at the pinch points, because there are some areas where the buffer and the lots are pretty close to one another, so we do want to make sure, sometimes when they're drawn at this high of viewpoint, it's hard to see exactly what that distance is or exactly where that line is, especially when they overlap. So on the final plan, we'll want to know exactly what those measurements are, since it appears to be pretty close. Number of vehicular access points hasn't changed. They're still at 2. Minimum lot areas, again, much less of a concern now that they're utilizing conservation development standards. They have a lot more flexibility, and all practicality can make the lot sizes whatever they'd like to be, as long as they're following all the other requirements. Front yard setbacks, the empty nester products would have a front yard setback of 20 feet. The traditional product would have a front setback of 25 feet. Minimum side yard setbacks, the empty nest product would have 6-foot side yard setbacks with a 12-foot building separation. The traditional product type would have 7.5-foot side yard setbacks with a total of 15 feet of building separation between the products. And again, those are obviously typical figures. I'm sure it'll vary from lot to lot. Rear yard setbacks for the empty nester product is going to be 20 feet. For the traditional product, it's 25 feet, with a note that this isn't counting the permitted patio and deck encroachments of up to 10 feet into such setbacks as is currently provided for in the zoning resolution. Driveway setback from intersections, this was something we talked about at one of the prior hearings. And by and large, they're meeting the 40-foot requirement, but there is some question regarding some of the lots that are sort of at the tops of those intersections, and Mr. Fisher and I had a discussion, and my determination was the code really doesn't distinguish which lots that applies to and which it doesn't. It just says no lot shall be within 40 feet of that intersection, so I'm reading that as no lots, regardless of their location in the plan, can have a driveway within 40 feet of that intersection. Since given this plan layout that doesn't seem to work for a couple of lots, the applicant is requesting a divergence for that standard, which I'll get into momentarily. As Chairman Leff noted during the reading of the exhibits, the traffic impact study was approved by the Delaware County engineer last Friday, May 5th. We just got a copy of that today. It's in the latest revised submittal packet that's sitting there in front of you. In the conclusion, I read that it indicates that northbound left turn lanes, approximately 225 feet in length with 50-foot diverging tapers, will be required at each Rome Corners Road entrance. However, the engineer's office, or the study, I should say rather, did note that this could change to a single 3-lane section throughout that entire portion of the corridor upon further review of the final engineering plans once, or should the plan proceed to that stage. So it's a little too early to know exactly whether it's going to be 2 turn lanes or just one whole 3-lane section and then just paint it in with the turn lanes. That's usually not something that would be hashed out at this stage of the engineer's review, but it does show that the traffic can work with those improvements being made.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes, sir.
But does the township have any say-so whatsoever in that? Okay, thank you.
No, the county is the engineer for the township by statute. They're the ones who have the engineering standards and enforce sort of all of that. So moving on with parking, streets appear to be public. The applicant's development text does state on-street parking will be permitted on the non-fire hydrant side of the street, which is always good. There are 5 cluster mailbox areas being provided throughout the plan. Final placement and design is subject to approval by the United States Postal Service, who doesn't terribly have much of a care for what township zoning has to say about any of those issues, unfortunately. The stormwater ponds, they weren't labeled on the plans. They are labeled. It was pretty evident what they were. If you would refer to the utility plan, you could see where the storm lines were and which ponds they were going in and out of. But it's nice to see it on the illustrative plan, so that way when you're looking at all the different drawings, you know exactly what is where. So that's a positive change. For clarification, regarding landscaping, I've noted that there are 3 different park areas, so I'm going to go through them in detail a little bit. So what I'm going to call the terminus park, which is the southernmost park. So if you're going in that southern entrance into the plan off of Rome Corners Road, the road's going to go into the plan and sort of terminate at this, we're waiting to see, this park here. That was the one. So that park is located at the terminus of what is currently labeled as Road H in Phase 1 and contains one of the cluster mailbox areas, an asphalt pass system, a terminus monument sign that you'll see as you're driving into the plan, and an approximately 30 by 30-foot shelter, a seating wall, movable seating, and numerous plantings. So a nice pedestrian sort of central gathering area for the plan. The second park that's being proposed is a native grassland park, and this is bounded by roads A and B as labeled on the plans, and it's near the northernmost Rome Corners Road entrance in Phase 1. It contains one of the cluster mailbox areas, a mowed grass path network, native grass areas, including wet, tall, prairie, and perennial drifts, mounding, and a couple of benches in the center area. So this is more of a passive sort of natural space, not as programmed, and trying to, I think, highlight some of the either natural vegetation that's still on the site or natural vegetation that one would have seen in Ohio at one point before a lot of it got plowed under for fields and agriculture. And then the third park is the Native Arboretum Park, bounded by roads D and E as labeled on the plans at the western end. In Phase 3, it contains a gravel path network and a central seating area with limestone benches and woodland exhibit placards. And again, sort of more enjoying the natural area of the site, but instead of focusing on the open prairie grasslands, this is focusing more on the existing trees on the site. Speaking of trees, we do have that tree survey that was missing when this plan was first submitted. It has been updated as of the revisions today to reflect the current site layout. So of the 7,534 existing trees surveyed on the site, approximately 5,195 of them will be retained, which equates out to approximately 68.95% of the site. 2,339 of them would be removed, 110 of which are ash trees and 153 of which are in poor condition per the tree survey. Regarding pedestrian connectivity, the trail systems, both systems provide access to the natural forest, wetlands, and streams on the property. The looping system on the northern end of the plan will feature a wooden platform and a bird viewing blind. So sorry, Paul, I know I'm jumping all around here. He's going to pull up the plan that shows. So there's one of the trail systems. You can see it goes through past the wetland, through a lot of the forested area, a lot of different vegetation types going on in there. And then there's the looping trail system. So again, through the woods, providing access to those wetlands and sort of within view of the stream. So they've got these natural features on the site, and they're not just ignoring them. It's nice to see that they're building trail systems that are trying to incorporate those items into the site for the enjoyment of the residents. Moving on to signage. Both entrances would be flanked by a set of brick entry structures approximately 8 feet in height, one of which would contain the plan name and logo on the front, as well as the logo on the side. A freestanding monument sign, as I already noted, will also be placed within the terminus park. So on this drawing here, you can see in the bottom left of what you're looking at, that would be the brick entry structures flanking each side of each Rome Corners entrance. There'd be a sign on only one of those at each entrance, so there's not too much signage going on. And they've got this little circular logo that's still sort of a work in progress that they would put on the end columns, piers, at the bookending each of those structures. And then, Paul, if you can scroll up just a little bit, that upper right-hand sign is the sign that would be at the terminus. So when you're driving into the plan, that central park area I was talking about. The revisions today did address a few issues that staff had related to the signage. Staff still has some concerns about how the sign area of the signs are being measured. Usually per the definition of the zoning resolution, how we measure signs is like where it says Mira Luna, it has a bigger M and then lowercase letters. Usually we draw around the extremes of the letters when we do measure the sign area. So in this instance, they've measured exactly and cut out sort of that open space above the IRALUNA. We would incorporate that into the sign area because, like I said, we measure the extreme areas as per the zoning resolution. And then for the little logo circle, I think we would measure the entirety of that circle just because, especially they've noted on the plan that logo is still somewhat in flux. And it does seem like the brick treatment within that circle is different from the brick treatment of the pier, which to me indicates it's going to function as some sort of branding or logo purpose. So I'm sure all of these things are things we can work out in regards to signs. In fact, at this stage of the game, staff doesn't even always look for a lot of details regarding signs at rezoning. We're just looking for conceptuals. So even if the applicant wanted to just say, we acknowledge staff and we agree that we're going to comply with the zoning code, and we'll provide you more details at final to fully demonstrate that and not ask for a divergence to anything, I'd be okay with that. That's pretty par for the norm. And the reason we do that is, at the rezoning, we obviously want to be talking about big picture things. We don't want this discussion to get bogged down into exactly how we're measuring each letter on a sign. That's a little in the weeds for this step in the process. Moving ahead, like I said, with the divergences, I am going to go through each of the three that are currently requested just to help refresh everyone's minds of where we're at. So I've already noted, so here, start with A. I'm sorry, I skipped over one. They're requesting a divergence, as I noted, to proceed for the final plan to proceed under the version of the zoning resolution in effect at the time that the rezoning application was applied for. The second divergence is a request regarding the driveway, the 40-foot driveway setback that I noted. And the third divergence, which I haven't spoken to up to this point, is a divergence to section 903.11.b, which is a guideline to limit tree clearing to within 15 feet of foundations, except for dead or diseased trees. They're proposing to basically adhere to that to the best of their ability. Staff has some questions regarding that standard because if you read later into this standard, it just says it's a guideline and not necessarily a requirement. But if it's not a requirement, why is it necessarily in there? So out of an abundance of caution, I feel like, and I agree with the applicant's approach on this ultimately, to make sure there's just no doubt about whether or not they complied with that standard. They are just asking for a divergence to it. And that will remove any uncertainty that could exist regarding that topic. Again, moving into the comprehensive plan, I've already noted my comp plan review, which already appears in the memo, which I've already read through the prior hearings, remains unchanged because we're utilizing the comprehensive plan that existed at the time of application. On page 8 of 9 in the memo, I had a whole bunch of items that sort of was recapping all of the big picture items that still needed to be addressed by the applicant. I went through those items today, looked through the revisions that they submitted, and you can see the vast majority of them have been struck through. They've addressed them, with the only exception being that sign area calculation that I've already noted. Another thing of note, and this is something that we are probably going to need to get legal review on, is the applicant is proposing contingency for this zoning plan that would revert the zoning back to the existing rural residential classification if the development essentially does not happen. And there's more specific language in the final development plan, or on the preliminary development plan text of exactly what would trigger that. I have contacted council about it to see where they stand as to whether or not this is something we can do. I've yet to hear back from them. I'd also like council to just look at the wording just to make sure there isn't any recommendations that they would recommend, if it can be done, to help protect the interest of the township. So that's something atypical. I haven't really seen that before, so I don't really know how to advise the commission on that. I really do think that's something we're going to have to wait to hear back from Mr. Fowler about. Moving to the technical review, you can see the comments that are still open. 6 and 7 have to do with the stormwater setbacks and the conservation area setbacks. Again, it's just my comment that I want to see those exact measurements at final. Comment 11, just under development review, just documents the divergence. Comment 24 is something that they can wait to do at final development plan, so no need to focus on that. Comments 31 through 43 in the development review is all just procedural, informational, and stuff that would relate to the final development plan. Should we get that far, but it's just in there to give the applicant a heads up of this is what my expectations will be if that application is eventually submitted. Comment 49, Mr. Fisher and I were just discussing right before the hearing. I was asking for them to actually update the application form with the updated acreage, open space, and all those numbers, and they pointed out to me they actually did that on the page that that is inserted in the application before that. All of those numbers appear there, and their reason being that they didn't want to modify the original application form they submitted in September. So now that I can see that they've actually met the spirit and intent of my comment, I would consider comment 49 sufficiently addressed at this point. Under the divergence review, that just recaps all the divergences I just spoke of. The sign review, the only outstanding comment there is one I've already touched base on regarding sign area measurements. The rest of the comments throughout the rest of the tech review are just, again, more informational, procedural, record-keeping type of comments that don't require any action by the applicant. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Do applicant, so Mr. Fisher, if the three of you could state name and address, and then we'd like to hear from you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. David Fisher, Gephardt Fisher, 207 North 4th Street, Columbus, here on behalf of the applicant. Gary?
Gary Smith, 720 East Broad Street, Columbus, Ohio. And Jim Olin, 148 West Rock Road with Romanelli Hughes.
So just to remind everybody the roles, I'm the lawyer, Gary is the land planner, and Jim Olin is the representative of Romanelli Hughes. So thanks for the opportunity to be with you tonight. I want to start off with an apology that you got materials today from us. We don't like to do business that way, but we were trying to be responsive to Mr. Schaefer's comments, which were always right on target, and we were trying to work through all those issues. We also got the approved traffic study from the county late Friday afternoon, too late to copy it and submit it. So, and then the tree survey, kind of, the modifications of that are driven by the changes to the development plan, so it all kind of fits together, so I apologize. What I will tell you, though, is, and I hope Mr. Schaefer will agree with me, that everything you have today are all technical changes to the documentation that was presented on April 18th. So the April 18th package, which I'm assuming you've spent some time reviewing, that's the substantive proposal we're talking about tonight. Mr. Schaefer, do you disagree with that statement?
There. No, I'd say by and large, the changes are just responsive to my comments. They haven't made any substantive changes to the layout, open space percentages, or anything like that since the April 18th submission.
Thank you. So what you have before you tonight are modified packages that address, we think, and I think Mr. Schaefer just confirmed, all of the comments that we received from him last week that are primarily technical in nature, great comments, but technical in nature for the most part. To answer one question that he sort of raised, and I just want to always remind everyone, you don't do final engineering for a zoning application. So his comments about acreage size and certain things, all that is subject to some minor modification when you do final engineering, basically all on the ground, figuring out exactly how this is all going to work. So his comments are exactly on point, that we've gotten as far as we can with preliminary engineering to support that this project works. But all that will be updated with final engineering as a part of the final development plan. And Mr. Carter, that was a good question, and Mr. Schaefer's correct that the county does control the final outcome on engineering and subdivision and plating, but you do have another step on this process, which is the final development plan, at which time we'll be addressing those things like those road improvements out there. So it's not that you have a lot of say-so in that with the county, but you certainly have a lot of say-so with us in terms of reviewing the final development
And
plan.
I was just curious what the residents thought about that. Since that just came out, they just heard it tonight probably.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
good.
kinda
Okay, it's a
thinking
good
about
comment. So just a brief summary, because I know there's a lot of people who want to talk tonight, and we want to hear what you have to say, and we don't think we've made a lot of changes from the last application, but we'll talk about those. One of the things that was a big change is we did change this zoning to be a planned residential development with conservation standards. And Mr. Carter, I know you've been around a long time. I mean, we have tried, and I think a lot of developers have tried over the years to meet that standard. I don't know if anybody's ever met it before us tonight, but we have met it at a cost of lots, but we're happy with where we ended up with it. But conservation standards require 50% of the project to be open space, so you don't have to run the math very hard. 129 acres, what's 50, less some roadway, what's 50% of that is pretty much half the land here is now in common open space. In fact, we're a little bit over, we're 50.1 exactly. And Mr. Schaefer reviewed a lot of the details, such things as from our last application, not our first application, from our last application till now, we've dropped another 19 lots. We've gone from 185 lots to 166 lots. We reduced our density from 1.79 to 1.62. Interestingly enough, one of the bonuses you get for doing a PRD with conservation standards is an increase in density up to 2.2 units. We've actually reduced our units, reduced our density. So we're 0.58 less than what the ultimate density could be on a PRD with conservation standards. That's driven by the site and the layout and the size of lots and all those sorts of things. Mr. Schaefer did a good job of reviewing the divergences. I know that was something that you had comments about. Rosen's had comments about the last time we were together. I would say in the case of every divergence, they're highly technical, and in large part, they're driven by some language in your code or in interpretation. So for example, the first divergences, we're simply saying is, allow us to develop this in accordance with the code and the plan that we've put before you tonight. So if you would change your code over time, that we wouldn't have to say, how do we comply with that code? Which is sort of, I have a discussion all the time with one of your lawyers, Pete Griggs, about this, about, you know, if you change your code significantly, it would be what we refer to in the development business as a taking. So you'd have a lawsuit put against you by somebody saying, you used to say density was this, now it's this. Well, you know, you got to live with what the beauty about a PRD is, and I was just talking to Joe about this before the meeting. A PRD is a contract. It's a contracted zoning that we agree with you, this is exactly how this is going to develop. It's not like a zoning classification like state residential or rural residential where there's about 3 pages of zoning and compliance and that's it. This is a contract that we all go by. So all we're saying is whatever we agree to going through this process, that is the process by which we continue going forward. The second technical point is your code talks about how close driveways can be to intersections. And Mr. Schaefer's right, we had a lot of conversation about that. We understand that when it's at a corner of an intersection that you don't want driveways too close. But there's a couple of streets in here where there's houses across the street from a T, so you get a road coming down, a road coming across, you get a T intersection. The houses and lots across the street from that can't meet that standard. So that's the rationale there for that. And then the last one, the third one is the one about the trees, and your code says 2 different things in the same section. And this is all explained in our divergence. It says you shall do this, so basically a requirement, but later in the same section, it says this is just a guideline. And so we're saying we're going to comply to the maximum extent possible, but we want the guideline provisions to control. So not your typical divergences of give us some big benefit here that sometimes the developers would ask for, just pretty highly technical things. And only 3 of them, I know we came in, I think we started with 5 or 6 or something like that. So we're trying to be responsive to you and to the residents to say divergences are special circumstances and they should be limited. But at the same time, they are permitted by your code, and therefore we're asking you to consider those 3. In terms of additional comments that we added to the text at the end is Mr. Schaefer had asked, are you going to do any condos here? We said, no, these are all fee simple lots. All these will be fee simple lots. We added a statement that we've always added in ours and we would comply with in any event, which is you can only park a car on the non-fire hydrant side of the street. Your fire department's going to require that anyway. The third one is that we wanted to make it very clear to you that the cell tower that's in the southeastern open space, that is not included in any of our open space calculations. Neither the location of the cell tower, its fencing and some perimeter even outside the fencing, or the access easement. All that's excluded. About a half an acre that we exclude out of the zoning to say we're not trying to count that as open space. So just pointed that out for you. And the comment Mr. Schaefer just brought up with council, we don't care. We're happy to take that language out, but Mr. Schaefer raised an issue in his technical comments that said, what if you don't get sanitary sewer? and you've now zoned this as PRD, and it can't be developed. And we said, well, what we're willing to do is, we're willing to say, if all this isn't resolved and we don't start development within 5 years, we agree that it automatically reverts back to its current rural residential RR zoning. That was simply something we added to address Mr. Schaefer's comment. If your council says it's not enforceable, it can't be needed, I personally think it's enforceable for the reason I shared earlier, that a PRD zoning is a contract, and the development text controls everything that happens. Since the development text controls everything that happens, it says it's an automatic reversion back. That's not a deal breaker for us. If your council says you can't have it, take it out, that's fine with us. It was simply meant as an accommodation to give some comfort to what Mr. Schaefer was raising in that regard. Mr. Schaefer talked about signage, and we will make the statement unequivocally that we will comply with your sign code. We're not going to be seeking any divergences. So to the extent we need to further refine that as we come through this process, either at this stage or at final development plan, we're committed that we will comply with your signage standards. The traffic study is now completed. That was one of the issues, one of the reasons, just so you understand how that process works. Mr. Schaefer's right. We didn't want to build the road to the edge because there's a lot of road to build for no purpose. We were willing to dedicate the right-of-way and say if the guy to the west of us ever wants to build a road, we have him in easement, he can build it there. The Delaware County engineer said, no, I want the road built. So we made that change. We built the road directly to the boundary. Also, you'll notice some of the curvatures of some of the interior roads changed a little bit. That's all traffic pattern related when they're concerned about traffic speeds in a particular area, that the curvature is not too sharp so that cars can come around at a higher speed, not a high speed, but that's an issue for them. That's why that took so long, and that resulted in some changes in our plan. But it is now approved and complete and in your packages. Mr. Schaefer mentioned a revised tree survey, which also addresses the tree survey as it relates to the plan that you now have in your packages. So it's just a minor update in that regard. And then I'm going to turn it over to Gary Smith here in just a minute to go over a short summary of the open space amenities. I think he's got a slide presentation along with that. I simply want to point out to you, PRD with conservation standards, 50% open space, protected in perpetuity if this zoning would go forward. None of that applies if the RR standards stay in place. That's a major benefit to, we think, the community at large, is you have large areas of well taken care of open space in perpetuity for the township by proceeding with a PRD zoning. Gary, I'm going to turn over to you to do your little presentation.
Well, I feel like everybody stole my thunder, so I will, I'll just try and kind of stick to the highlights. I mean, Joe did a great job of going through all of the technical aspects of the development, and David talked about some of the bigger picture stuff. I want to focus really just a little bit on the design side of this and kind of what we went through to try to respond to a lot of the comments that you guys had made in the last couple of meetings. So I'm just going to breeze through as long as my clicker will work. Yeah, there we go. So you guys have all seen these plans. So this is where we started ultimately. As Joe mentioned, we were at 231 lots. Oh, there we go. That works. So we were at 231 lots. We actually had the glass property there to the side. So we had a pretty significant amount of lots. We had the glass property. One of the comments, one of the topics of conversation is, hey, let's pull the glass property out of it and deal with, really the two different products that we have here, because the glass property could be developed independently as an RR. I think that was a fair statement. So we went back. This is what we came back to you with the last time. Well, maybe. Now you went full screen. There we go. So this is what we came back to you with the last time. And then really where the discussion went to the last time was, hey, can we do something to, number one, we had a lot of comments about, you're so close. Can we just get to the conservation development standards? Can we take advantage of that, what you guys are trying to do? We think it'd be a great site for it. And then what we'd really like you to do is pull some of those ponds. I don't know if it won't show up on the screen, but can we pull some of those ponds out of the trees so that, we can save more of the trees, we reduce the development footprint a little bit. And so that's how we got to kind of where we are here. So you'll notice the pond at the top pulled away from the property line and into the development. The pond at the bottom pulled out of the trees and down into the open area on the south side there. The pond in the middle is actually in an open area already, so it's not really encroaching on any of the trees there. And then we've reduced the development footprint in a lot of areas. And not only that, one of the other things, let's see if I can go back a little bit. So you can kind of see the differences if I just flip from one to another. Yeah, you can kind of see the differences in just the amount of trees ultimately that remain and get preserved with the changes to this plan. And I think that was a big highlight. The other thing that, the board asked us to do, and John, I think this was one of your comments, was, to find some more open space. We didn't have some of those, open areas in the middle of the development, some of those pocket parks. And then, how do you deal with some of the natural areas you have? And so we actually put a lot of thought into that. And these are some of the things that I'm really the most excited about because, we got to sit down with Romanelli and Hughes and kind of ruminate on this a little bit and say, how do we do something here that's maybe a little bit different than, everybody else has ever done? Everybody has a park with a gazebo in it, and, other things, and that's great. A lot of people like that. But with what we're talking about here and this really kind of high-end empty nester, patio home type product, and some of these higher-end, larger homes, we're trying to find something that sets this development apart from, other developments that Romanelli and Hughes already has in the area. For Mirasol, which is just to the south of us, it's a beautiful development, it's a very nice development, but it doesn't really have the open space advantages that this development has. The other, what's the one we just did? Vinmar. Vinmar is a very nice development, but it doesn't have some of these same features that this site has. So we have the opportunity to create something really unique here, which really got us into then kind of these open spaces. So this is kind of an overall aerial. I had the computer artist basically draw the boundary around it so you could easily see kind of where the property boundaries end, so you could get a sense for, what was being preserved. One of the things I want to point out about all of these images that you're going to see in the video too, keep in mind that the houses are houses that Romanelli and Hughes has developed. So we use those as part of the footprint so that you could get an understanding. But we don't have any of the landscaping around the houses. So you don't have all the front yard trees, the backyard trees, those kind of things aren't shown in here because it just takes so much time and so much memory. This file's already almost a gig. So the video file's almost a gig. So it was just too memory intensive to put all that stuff in. So you won't see that in this image, and it's left out basically on purpose. So that will all be in there. So this is a kind of a bird's eye view of the development. So, and landscaping around the ponds, all of those things have kind of been left out of this. So all of that will occur as we go through the final development plans. And then, there we go. So this is just the development plan. It does show some of the pathways, but I'll just go straight into kind of the detailed portions of it. So this is, as Joe mentioned, this is really our entry park. When you come in the main entry for the larger homes, this is the first thing that you see. And this really defines kind of a sense of entry for us. This is, we have the kind of the entry sign that you first drive up to. And then you have this really beautiful pavilion structure that Romanelli and Hughes has built in some of their higher end communities. Has a fireplace in it, has some grilling stations, movable tables, picnic tables, and then you've got open lawn area for, people to play, throw a Frisbee, be a little bit more active. This could be really the active space for the development. Here's kind of an image of what that looks like. This is essentially what you'll see when you drive up to that T intersection is that Mira Luna sign with the pavilion behind it. That's essentially what the landscaping is ultimately going to look like or envisioned to look like so far. And then, so the park to the north, on the north side, when you first come into the patio home area, the empty nester, what we really said is, okay, let's do something different here. Let's start to take advantage of some of the natural area that we have and go back to native plant material for the area, for Ohio, and incorporate that in an attractive way in kind of a garden. So what you have here is really a native prairie grass, meadow. You can kind of see an example of that in the photo underneath what that's ultimately going to look like. So again, very kind of quiet, contemplative space. You can walk into the middle of that. We have some benches in there, so you can go sit, talk with your neighbors, read a book, whatever you want to do. But we wanted this space to be pretty quiet. You know, for most of these folks that are going to live in the patio homes are going to be retirees or empty nesters, you know, with more of a kind of a passive way of living. You know, most of them get their exercise by walking, you know, take advantage of the walking paths, you know, different things. So we have that. This is kind of an example of what that looks like from an aerial perspective. And then how do we go back into the other open area that we have, the last open area kind of in the center, and then create something unique from that? And then the idea was to really create kind of an arboretum where we would have not only the opportunity to kind of walk through the space, but to experience really the native trees of Ohio. So we're gonna populate that with native trees. We'll have plaques kind of dedicated to the trees, what each of those trees are, you know, maybe some characteristics of the trees on those plaques, similar to what you would see if you went to maybe Dahl's Arboretum or down to OSU to the Arboretum that they have there. And here's kind of an example of what that looks like. You know, in the center, again, we're gonna have some bench seating areas, but this, you know, gravel paths that take you through this space. So you can, you know, walk to these trees, walk to the plaques, kind of see what the different trees are. You know, a little bit of kind of an experience plus, you know, a little bit of an educational experience as part of that. And then, you know, the rest of it was really how do we take advantage of really the most beautiful features that we have, which is the existing trees, and doing it in a way that we're, you know, sensitive to the existing trees, don't disturb them, don't remove them. So the lower area ultimately becomes kind of a woodland walk. And so it's a path that kind of takes you through the woods, connects you actually up to the Arboretum area. So you can walk from the Arboretum area down into this and around the sidewalk. It also gives you more of a network of trails that you can walk on, not just the sidewalks in the community. So if you wanted to do more of a circuit walk and, you know, get your exercise in, you could do a combination of sidewalks and the paths here. And then the path to the north, you know, we have the wetlands up there and, you know, we have the trees. We've got some openings in the trees that exist right now that, you know, we could create kind of a bird watching area, sanctuary where we could have a little bird blind. You could sit, relax, watch nature in those areas. And, you know, get back out and, you know, head home and, you know, go on about your day. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about the entries, the signage. Paul, so here is a kind of a rendering of what the entry looks like. This is a static rendering of the entry. And then, Paul, if you would maybe key up that video. I just have a real quick video for you. This is just kind of a fly-through that gives you kind of an example of driving through or working your way through the development. So go ahead, Paul. So this is really moving into the main entry, the larger homes. This takes you really into that central gathering space. And this moves pretty quick, so I apologize. I could have had him slow it down, but it would have taken forever. So this is what you would see driving in. Then we're gonna go over ultimately to kind of the Arboretum Park area, what that looks like. And then it's gonna take us over to kind of the empty nester, the patio home park. And then it's gonna give you a kind of a 360-degree kind of bird's eye view. And you can see how we've tried to incorporate tree rows into this and incorporate open space into this. So there really is a lot of open area in this development, not just the setbacks themselves, but, in the existing trees. Actually had them render the tower so you guys could see where the tower is. But that's it. So now, Paul, if you want to go back to the presentation, just in case, and I'll turn it over to you guys. If you have, questions, be happy to answer them. I'm sure there's a lot of folks from the community that want to speak too.
This is one of those projects where, we appreciate the feedback that we've had both from the township and from the residents. As you can see, we have put a ton of time and thought into this, listening to the things that people have said, talking about nature, talking about trees, and Vince has been heavily involved in this process in terms of just incorporating that into a site, which I think is unlike anything here in Central Ohio for sure. So we're excited about the project. I think we've come a long way, and I hope that the residents and I hope staff enjoys it as well. So I appreciate it.
That's it.
Clock, or are we?
No, we forgot to set it up, but I have my phone here. I'll try to put it here where people can see. Or at least the speakers can see, I should say.
With that, we're going to go to public comment. So I just asked that we're going to keep you to 5 minutes, and we're going to go in orderly fashion. So I'm going to start over here. If you raise your hand, if you did not swear yourself in, please tell us beforehand. When you come up to the mic, speak your name clearly and your address, and then you'll have your 5 minutes from that point forward. All questions or comments are directed to us, and then we're going to accumulate that information. We'll respond after we get through all the public comment. Okay? So with that, coming across, second row, right here? No? Over? I know you're gonna come up. Come on. Clint, we've heard from you a lot. We expect you to talk, so it's okay.
My name's Clint Warner, 5920 Plum Road. Just looking at this, I didn't have time to see any of this. Who's going to use all this park? The residents that live there, because they'll have no fishing signs up, nobody's allowed in here unless you live in our neighborhood. I'd imagine there's a 4,000-acre park called Alum Creek State Park over here that has all this stuff and doesn't bother anybody. And there's another one over here called the Hoover Dam. And in Genoa, we have a lot of parks and preservations. We pay a lot of tax dollars for that. Those are parks that the whole township uses. This isn't. Looks good, but it doesn't fit the area. So I'd like to know, like the developers, why they don't go survey some of the homeowners around the area before they start something like this, so they can hear what people want to do without involving all this. That's just a question. This just does not fit the area. There's a map that you guys have on here, C2, on your own slides. And if you look at this, it's the C2. Every lot totally circling this development on the drawing, they're all rural residential. Every single one of them. And I'm talking hundreds of little places here. We're talking miles. We're not talking feet. Everything around this development is RR, rural residential. And that's what we'd like to see it stay. It's C2 vicinity map. And then because the development is in Big Walnut schools, I've noticed when they had the 54 acres and different things, the glass property, anything in the Big Walnut schools, the houses are cheaper, the lot sizes are smaller, and I just don't understand it. Your development that they have across Lewis Center, I think that is, or Marisol, those lot sizes are 0.3 to 0.4 acres or more. And they want to do what here? 1.9 or something? But that's Olentangy School District. Okay, so the houses over there, I know one that sold for over $1 million, okay? Bigger houses, bigger lot sizes, but as soon as the developer gets into Big Walnut, everything goes down. And you can look it up on a lot of stuff and see that's true. The traffic, you're gonna add 332 cars, both entryways coming out onto Rome Corners. That's just the 332 cars. The in and out trips, I think, are 10 a day from each house. So that's just a terrible traffic burden. Also, the kids in the Big Walnut School District, they're getting dumped in the Big Walnut School District. The roads torn up, they're unsafe, and you guys did get the traffic study, and we now know that that better be a 3-lane road going up and down through there. But it just does not fit the existing area. Nowhere close are these patio homes need to be surrounded by all rural residential lots. The other thing is, they never mention, if they're gonna do something like this, why don't they save the big barn on the property that's next to the telecommunications? You know, there's a big barn down there that they could redo and have a party barn or something like that instead of wiping out how many years of this has been farmed. So there's a lot of things, but it just does not fit the area, and all the parks and stuff inside the development are pretty. I see what happens to them 3 to 5 years down the road. It ends up being a weed field. But hopefully you'll listen to the homeowners here. I don't think this fits the area, conservation or not. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Glenn. Sure, next to Glenn. Going this way?
Good evening. My name is Jay Carey. I'm at 7540 Plum Road. I appreciate the forethought that the developers have put into trying to make this a special subdivision. I appreciate the work that Clint has done and can tell you about map C2. I've not looked that deep into things. What I can tell you is you can look at that map or take a look at Google Earth. He's right, that does not fit the area. It's been zoned our rural residential 2-acre lots per home. I think if you were putting homes on 2-acre lots there, this would be an empty crowd. That's not what, if you continue to develop it like the surrounding area, you're not gonna have any pushback. The voters of this area, all you gotta do is look at Berkshire Township. They tried high residential and had to go to the Supreme Court and they lost in the ballot box. I think you're gonna find enough people here, they're gonna push back on this to where you're gonna have the exact same result. It doesn't fit the area. That's right beside interstate, and it didn't fit the area, and the people have spoken. Listen to the people. I would ask these guys to listen to the people, but you're the ones that are here to listen to the people. So please, I hope you make the right decision in that regard. It clearly doesn't fit the area. For questions, one of them I have is in regards to the sewer. Are they gonna get the sewer connection from the west, and what happens to the whole project if it doesn't? Why are we even looking at this zoning if we don't know about the sewer? That's, to me, a bigger question, as big a question as we had to have the traffic study. So we kept postponing so we could get the traffic study, but we don't know about sewer. Doesn't the whole thing hinge on sewer? So why are we even doing this now? So that's my question for you guys. And let's talk about the divergences briefly. when you look at divergences, and it's divergence from the standards, really what you're talking about is lowering our standards to meet their needs. Is that what Genoa Township's about? We're gonna lower our standards and have 0.19 acre lots when everything around is 2 acre lots? And it's currently zoned for 2 acre lots? We're lowering, they're asking this township and you 5 individuals to lower your standards. That's not what Genoa Township's about. At least it hasn't been until now, and I hope it doesn't start that way this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Trevor. Same row as Jay. Ma'am? No? All right. Back, next row, coming across. White shirt. Yep.
Giddy up. Sandy Young, 7700 Plum Road. And what you're doing is beautiful. It's lovely, but it doesn't fit the area. I do have to tell you, yeah, I've been here 71 years because my grandparents lived on Worthington Galena Road. So I've seen a lot of things change. One thing that won't change is the people. We sort of are a different breed. We moved out here because what we wanted. And yeah, we have muskrats in our pond, and you'll have muskrats in your pond, and you'll have vegetation. It's called duckweed, and you'll have to have someone take care of that. The trails are lovely, but I know that none of us will be able to enjoy them. We'll get what's left over. And what we will get are, you will have, I'm sure you're going to have trash containers. You're going to have a lot of varmints, because we do have a lot of varmints. I read about your HOA, and it said about animals that people want for their homes have to be on leash. And you have to get permission to put up a fence. I think even under an electrical fence or one of those invisible fencing, you have to have permission. You're going to have to keep your dogs, heaven forbid your cats, because we have coyotes, big time. Every night we put our chickens in so that they don't get eaten. I take my cat in. That's the kind of people that live here. We're not saying that these people can't be, and I know they're looking for their first home, so they're looking for a lovely place to live, but it's already lovely. It's already lovely. And one thing I feel is like we're the leftovers. We're the leftovers. We're what's left of Genoa Township. And we're leftovers, and it's sort of like there's nothing we can do. I did try to sell my house. Actually, I put a bid on a house in Berkshire Township. It sold half hour after I put my offer in. It's so hard to find someplace to go. And I guess that's it. I really appreciate all hard work and everything that people have done to try to make us happy or help us out, but I don't think this development's going to do it. Thank you.
Same row.
Hi, my name is Roxanne Jansen. I live at 3935 Rome Corners. I'm discouraged because I feel like as a community, we have said right from the start, we do not want you to change this zone. And you've let these people go to a tremendous amount of work to try and come up with something that is not what we're asking for. I think she just said, and he said, we don't want you to change this zoning. We want our rural setting. We moved out here. I used to live in Westerville in a beautiful Romanelli and Hughes home. We sold it and moved out here because we wanted to be surrounded more by nature. We live on a 2-acre lot that it sounds like you're going to bulldoze the front end of my trees so that you can widen this road, so that we can put in a ton of people, so that we can overcrowd the schools that I substitute in. And trust me, they are so tight. So then you're going to have to start building more schools, and you're going to swallow up more land for that. And you're going to be trying to hire more teachers for that. I don't understand. You guys are our representatives, and we've been telling you from the start, this isn't what we want. You don't have to develop every area. It's ironic. You've got this beautiful plan, and it is beautiful, guys. You've done a lovely job. But you've got this beautiful idea of why don't we, it's kind of like going to Africa and getting all the animals and putting them in a zoo. And you've destroyed this area of Africa in order to do that. The animals and the foliage and everything, they're already there. Let us enjoy them the way they are. We're enjoying it now. You know? I just don't understand why you guys are continuing to talk about all the details when the very first question was, can we rezone to do this? And everybody said, please, no.
Hi, my name is Christina Johnson, and I live at 5999 Plum Road. I live actually in Berkshire Township, but I border Genoa Township. I own 65 acres, which is currently farmed. I rent out the fields to a farmer who puts out soybeans, wheat, and corn. And I'm in support of this development. And the reason being is that every year in this country, we lose 1.5 million acres of farmland to development. And we have to plan our growth in this country. And we have people here in this Berkshire Township and even Genoa Township who would love to see the trustees of these townships turn back the clock and go back to zoning of 5-acre lots. And that's a misuse of farmland. That swallows up way too much farmland, which should be retained for growing food for people. In the last 20 years, we have lost 30 million acres of farmland in this country due to development. And that's where I'm getting my statistics from, is from an organization called the American Farmland Trust. They have a website called farmland.org. And you can go on YouTube, and they have a video called Losing Ground, urban sprawl documentary on YouTube. And it talks about how much farmland we're losing in this country. 30 million acres in the last 20 years is equivalent of putting the state of Iowa under concrete and asphalt. We cannot continue to do that by having zoning laws where we're telling people, you know, we need low-density housing. That loses our valuable farmland. We need high-density housing. We need to preserve as much farmland as possible for future generations. So that's why I support the farmers who wish to sell their property to Romanelli and Hughes or any other developer. And we need to have responsible growth, and that means using our farmland in a responsible manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Same row coming across, sir? Last two? Okay, next row. Nope, coming across. Hat, yep.
Randy Rocky, 7503 Linder Way. I also own some property on Rome Corners, which is right across from this. It's a beautiful development, and like everybody else says, it doesn't belong here. I moved up here to live in a rural residential area. I have 1.5 acres, and then I bought the property behind me. At any rate, my understanding, I went to the last town.
Hang on a second. we could just keep the side conversations down so we can hear everybody, be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Danny?
I went to the last township meeting, and I didn't realize that the reason why we're here is because in 2016, there were two trustees who went against what their constituents wanted and changed the comprehensive plan, the way it was my understanding, and reduced this acreage now, and that's why they're allowed to be doing what they're doing. And now we got in two trustees who ran on keeping Genoa Township rural residential. They both got elected. They're the ones that are changing it back to the way it was pre-2016. 2016, I was raising kids. I didn't pay much attention to any of this going on. Now, because of that glitch, or because I don't know why those people changed the comprehensive plan. Nobody seems to know why. Or maybe somebody does, I just don't know. But now it's getting changed back to where it was. What they're trying to do here is being grandfathered in. Yet we know that's not what anybody wants. No one ever wanted it to be changed to begin with. So why are you trying to change it? Take this development, you've put a lot of money into it, which that's your job. You know, everybody's feeling sorry for you guys. You build a beautiful place, you build beautiful communities. People usually welcome you. When they hear Romanelli and Hughes is going to build something, they welcome them into the community. They're not welcome to build this in the community. We don't want it. Nobody wants it. I don't begrudge the farmers and the people who want to sell their land. If they just hang on to it a little longer, rural residential is going to be, it still is. I mean, there's a lot of people that want it. There's a demand for it. We don't need to change this. They can get their money. Just be a little more patient. So don't change it.
Same road coming across. There we go.
Todd Walco, 4054 Rome Corners Road. So this thing you guys are going to build, is it going to be a private community? Is it going to be a private community? Can they answer me?
No.
Can you answer me?
It's a private community.
So nobody will be able to go in there unless you live there, right? So it's a private little city all its own, right?
That's a question we'll ask them in a little bit. So,
Can't answer them now?
no, just make your comments. We'll do that later.
So are you guys going to have statues like the great job you did down here with the Armenian estates? Are we going to? I mean, that ought to be on the news. So, yeah, everybody here's, I'm under the same opinion. And all these guys that are selling their land, I'm all for them making all the money they can. That's great. I just think Romanelli comes in, wants something like this done. He says, well, we're going to go ahead and do this. We'll figure out a way. We'll make it happen. Because the guy's invested a hell of a lot of money in this. And I don't understand how you can invest so much money to get this set up and it's not a sure thing. So something doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that somebody would spend that much money on a maybe. That's my words. Thank you.
Same row, end of the aisle. No, cross, sir? No, keep going.
Hi. Hey, I'm Deborah Tornes, 3922 Shagbark Trail. I guess I won't harp on everything that everybody's already brought up. I just was thinking about how they did show the site plan there, and the area, what is it, from Alum Creek all the way over to Hoover basically is like rural residential between Lewis Center and Plum Road, or it's in the Hoover Reservoir Conservation Area, and this is just going to be like dropped right in the middle of, all, like they're saying, it's all rural residential right now. And I thought you're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to keep what the area is, be similar to what the area is. I mean, what we've learned from being here, is that zoning's there for a reason. It's for the welfare of the general township. It permits the community to control the development, providing orderly growth. And as Ohio law includes provisions for adopting and amending the plan, it also includes provisions for enforcing it. And everybody here is pretty much for enforcing the rural residential that's already been zoned. Both when subdivision Shagback Trail went in and was it Linder Way? Linder Way, they all went with the rural residential. Everybody's on 2 acres as required. It seems like we're spending a lot of time making sure that their proposal meets a zoning that isn't even what's there right now. And they're wasting all of their time making this proposal and spending all this money when it's zoned rural, and they're trying to meet it as best they can, but they're having variances, and we're supposed to be happy because they're meeting a zoning. If they met the rural residential zoning and then asked for a deviant, a variance, what'd you call that?
Divergence.
Divergence, thank you. It would be different. And then nobody would be here like saying what, you know what I'm saying? It'd be like just meet what's there, and then if there's a problem with the design and the engineering and it doesn't work because of the wetlands out there, you're preserving a lot of the woodlands out there. That'd be spectacular if they were trying to meet that one, but I don't see why we should be jumping for joy if they're meeting something that's not what is there. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't, and then also, of course, with all the flooding, I don't know, with the county engineers district, if they're putting in all these smaller lots, obviously it's gonna flood more down the creek and go into the Shagbar Trail. We flood all the time anyway when it rains. It's not gonna help, and of course, it is a site unlike any other because it's in Genoa Township in a rural area that they have kept very nice. And you've created parks for everybody to enjoy. You've created community areas for people to enjoy things with each other. And I don't see that really happening with this development. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Hi, Brian Tornis, 3922 Shagbark Trail. Again, I won't repeat what everybody else has said. The only thing I thought was ironic is actually, if you look at the graphic, they put up the nice flyover. If you expand that out just a little bit more, or actually you look around the perimeter of it, you see that stark difference of how you have an island out in the middle of a rural residential that's being proposed. I mean, it's a stark difference that we're seeing there. The only thing really I'm gonna talk to is a little bit more on the stormwater and the traffic studies. Yes, I think to your point, the county engineer is the one who ultimately is responsible for approving or denying. We, as a township, though, can approve or deny even moving on beyond where it's zoned right now, which is rural residential. Talking to the stormwater aspects, I think they were very proud of themselves, which they should from a conservation development standpoint. They got 51% green space. If I do my math correctly, if it's rural residential 2-acre lots, even if somebody's building a 15,000 square foot home, or 5,000 square foot home and 10,000 square feet of garage and pavement and everything else, that's still 83% green space that we're getting, not 51. So it still isn't anywhere close to what you get with a rural residential development from just the simple math, and that means more stormwater runoff, more flooding issues that we're already seeing problems with that we're gonna have, and less traffic. So again, the traffic study's there, yes, we see we have to add the lanes, but if you don't go away from rural residential, you don't have those problems that we're already talking about, both on stormwater and traffic. Thank you.
Back corner? Sir? No? Back row? Well, you come up to the mic, Angie. Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but truth, so help you God?
So help me God. I just want to,
Name and address.
Angela Graziosi, 7515 Mercy Loop, Galena, Ohio. I just want to encourage you guys up here. I saw what happened. Thank you for your work. And I grew up in rural Forest Lake, Minnesota, and I saw exactly what was happening. My parents were developers. We had acreage to develop, and we were held to the developing, to what we were zoned, and my family had to obey the laws. This is a big development. This is zoned rural residential. This is why many of us moved here. So I want to encourage you to look back. And I do remember in Mr. Leff, you probably remember too, when developments were coming in next to us and the community got up and they went back to the drawing board and kept going back to the drawing board. This is a lot of work, and just remember what we were zoned and what the community has wanted, and many long residents have spoken about it. And just hold true to the standards of what Genoa is. And someone very early on said, we are lessening the standards. This is not what the people have moved out here for and what the people have voted and said that they've wanted to keep this community like. So I just want to encourage you to look back to the standards of what Genoa Township wants to be, a nice place to live.
All right, last row, still on the side? Last two? No? Across the aisle? Yep, come on. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
I was at the trustee,
Name and address.
Wanda Ross, 3831 Shagbark Trail.
Thank you.
I was at the trustee meeting. I'm going to be very, very quick. The four words that were the most important thing that came out of that was when Mr. Schaefer said, pressure from the developer. That's it. Pressure. Pressure from the developer.
Across? Back row, anybody? Back row? Oh, sir.
My name's Chuck Lau, 3635 Rome Corners. Previously, I'd spoke about the runoff and like that. Today, what I'd like to address is the Genoa Township Planning Region 4 density as opposed to Genoa Township Region 5 density. Genoa 4, the density is 1.1 to 1.35 houses, units per acre. Density for the trustees are proposing to drop 5 back to is 1.35 to 1.65. You look at the map and everything there, basically north-south running down through the Rome Corners is the divide between Alum Creek and Hoover for the watersheds. Curves it around a bit, but roughly, Rome Corners Road pretty much acts as a divide. Region 4 is spaced at 1.1 to 1.35 to protect Hoover Reservoir. Hoover was built in 1935, if I remember right, for the receiving the water for the first time. Serves the city of Columbus. Alum Creek was constructed and completed in 1974, started receiving water late 74, early 75. The densities haven't changed. The density for 4, because it abuts on the west side of Hoover, was set to protect the water source of Columbus. At the time the densities and when Alum Creek Reservoir was built, it was a creek. It is now a reservoir. It provides water, drinking water for Genoa Township through Delco. It provides water for Westerville, and it provides water for the city of Columbus. The Ralph Scott Water Plant was built in '86 by Delco, right down there at the dam of Alum Creek, completed in 1986. It pulls 6 million gallons a day of water, and it serves eastern Delaware County. Something happens to Alum Creek, Genoa doesn't have any water. The Ohio EPA classifies these surface water sources, O'Shaughnessy, Olentangy River, Alum Creek, which service Delco, as high, excuse me, I lost my place. They're considered high risk because of being a surface water reservoir. The increased density that Mariluna is requesting increases the runoff. It increases the potential contamination of Alum Creek. It endangers everybody's water. They're asking for a divergence. Divergence 1 should not be approved. Property should be developed under the same requirements that are in for Region 4 on the east side of Rome Corners Road. Protection of the Alum Creek watershed should be just as strong as it is for the Hoover Reservoir. By developing under a higher density, this does not protect the sources of drinking water, rather it increases potential risk. Looking at the traffic study today, if I read it right, the Delaware County engineers said 830 vehicles a day in and out of Mariluna. That doesn't include existing traffic that goes up and down the road. This does not protect the safety of the residents on the road. The divergence 2, I had read that and had some stuff, and I think I totally misunderstood some of it, but my one concern about that is means of egress from the Mariluna does not do anything for the landowners right across the street. Some of these houses, some of these streets are opposite driveways and like that. You're not protecting the residents by doing that. We would ask that you look out to protect us and protect the drinking water. Thank you.
Is there anybody that we skipped over that wants to come up? Last chance, going once, going twice. All right, public comment is closed. Mr. Fisher, turn your mic on. Anything you wish to respond to at this moment before we look at a couple of these questions?
Just to clarify, the open space is community-based open space. It's not open to the general public, though the folks that raised that issue are correct.
So private property, you'll have signs
Right,
at the beginning
right.
that say private property.
Right,
Okay.
yep. We talked at the beginning of the presentation about engineering. It's a sort of a cart before the horse issue. We have been in communication with the Delaware County engineer, sanitary engineer for months now. I know Mr. Schaefer's even been in contact with Delaware County engineer. There are several routes to serve the sanitary sewer needs of this development. You don't go out and obtain the sanitary sewer routes unless you need them, which is the process we're going through right now. We wouldn't be here right now if we didn't think we had appropriate routing for the sanitary sewer for this project, but there are several routes available to us. We agree with Ms. Johnson in terms of development and appropriate development, though clearly she was a lone wolf here tonight in that regard. Stormwater, we have this conversation every time we come before any zoning commission that by a matter of law and statute, we cannot increase the stormwater runoff of this project onto adjoining property or to either the watersheds that were just discussed that are impacted by it. We cannot increase any off-premises runoff above its current runoff standards right now. That's why you have all the stormwater management you see on site that will be improved. That will be all reviewed and approved by our engineering and by Delaware County engineer before we're allowed to move forward. So it is not a correct statement that stormwater will increase as a consequence of this development. There was a comment about pressure from the developer. I hope you don't feel like we're pressuring you. We're simply following your zoning code that says anyone in this room has the right to request file a zoning application for a change in zoning. It's not our intent with respect to you or anyone in this room to pressure you to do anything. We're simply following your code and respectfully asking for a zoning request to be considered before this body. We respect all the residents that are here and their comments and their concerns. No pressure on our part whatsoever in that regard. the last gentleman that spoke, I was a little confused about his concern with the divergence. None of our divergences on driveways impact anything on Rome Corners Road. None of our lots front on Rome Corners Road. That divergence only deals with lots at the end of a T intersection within the development here. I would also state with respect to divergences, the reason I went through them in the detail that I did is they're, for the most part, if not totally, really technical, trying to square your code where it says some things that are questionable in terms of interpretation. So with that, Gary, Jim, you have anything else to add? Okay.
Mr. Schaefer, anything to add?
I'm just going to speak quickly regards to the pressure comment. I hope no one construed that as me feeling like that Romanelli and Hughes or any other developer in particular, for that matter, is pressuring myself or the township in general. That comment was in regards to big picture planning concepts. I did talk about development pressures in terms of, there is development pressure in terms of development is marching its way northward in the region. And that pressure is pushing on our undeveloped area. It's a very common general term that planning and zoning folks use all the time about development pressures. You hear it all the time. So that wasn't in reference to this developer or any other applicant. It was just talking about development in general here and in the region. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of growth going on, and that it's pushing, you sort of got a high pressure, low pressure thing going on, and it's butting up against each other. So just for, if nothing more than the applicant's clarification, I did not state that they were pressuring me or the township individually.
And let me just respond as well that he's absolutely right that throughout central Ohio, development pressure is immense. All of us read the newspapers. We see what's going on with the housing shortage in central Ohio, and all communities are being asked and looking at further housing options for people. The other comment I want to make, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I want to mention this. We don't know what happened with this comprehensive plan update that was referred to earlier and who did what or how it happened. All we know is you have a comprehensive plan, which is a legal document that's required by statute for you to proceed with zonings. I'm assuming at the time it was adopted, there were public hearings and there were also public comment sections that resulted in that comprehensive plan. We can't react further than to say, here's the comprehensive plan, and here's how we think we comply with it.
Okay.
You want me to answer a couple of those?
Sure. You want to?
Sure. The person that said, that nobody else will be able to use the parks within here, Genoa Township doesn't want the park land because they have enough parks. We have a park levy, and they take care of all those. If every subdivision gave them the green space to take care of, it's way, way too much to take care of. And therefore, if these are in a development and those homeowners association fees are paying for that, then that's why they're just for their use. It's not like they're trying to be, special or something like that, different than everybody else. If they went public, then Genoa Township would have to pay for them. Mr. Lowe, Planning Area 5 was always 1.1 with non-conservation and 1.35. And the most current update to the comprehensive plan got that back to 1.1, 1.35. The zoning commission recommended 1.35 to 1.65, but the trustees took that back to exactly where it was. Unfortunately, to the comment where it's actually 2019, Mr. Rocky, I believe it is when the densities kind of disappeared for a couple years, unfortunately. But legally, they disappeared. And we still have, it depends on each individual property, the rural environment and all that still applies. But those did disappear for a couple years. And the Planning Area 4, which is the west side of Hoover, was 0.75. Now that has gone to 1.1, 1.35. And that's been, because that's what the residents agreed with, that's what the trustees agreed with, and it is really a reasonable thing within the township. As far as rural residential versus PRD, our comprehensive plan to the lady who swore herself in following standards, Roman and Hughes are following the standards that were in place at the time. It's unfortunate for us, the densities were not there, but they are fairly close to what those requirements were. And there's always the option, and you don't have to go to PRD, but from rural residential, that option is listed as a potential thing to happen in the future. You know, and every planning area has different recommendations, and Planning Area 5 has always had that. Runoff, as I mentioned, and this is, if I can make a quick point here, I'm not trying to get ahead of myself here, but rural residential is great. I live on rural residential, I love it. My daughter lives in New Albany on a very small lot, and she loves that. But there's no guarantee on drainage and as far as setbacks and all that in rural residential, which I understand most people like. But the PRD does offer 170-foot setbacks on roads, 100-foot setbacks from houses, which makes, when you drive down this road, I believe that you're not going to see much of that over there. Now, you're going to see the cars, and there will be more traffic, there's no doubt about that. But there are some advantages to rezoning to a PRD versus, you know, possibly keeping rural residential and definitely not a suburban residential, if that makes sense for you. So let me see, I think that was all the ones that I had. And as Mr. Fisher addressed, they have the right to apply for a zoning change, and they do, and that's on them. If they lose this, that's their money they spent. They took a chance. The lady from Shagbark Trail, the zoning, let's see, there was a misconception there. What I just said, the numbers were 1.1 to, and they would be allowed to go 1.3. They're currently at 1.62 under their firms, but they do not have to follow that, but that's where it was. So anyways, were there other questions that you wanted to answer?
No, I think we've covered all the questions. Since you're on a roll, would you like to ask your questions?
Sure. First of all, I do appreciate, there was comments from the public before that said, sometimes it seems like, you know, developers in the township have all gotten together and a plan shows up and oops, it's a done deal and all that. As you've seen here, this plan has changed so much and things have gone from really not very good to getting closer to what would be considered a rural residential PRD in this area. I mean, it's a lot closer, and so those things do happen. So I give kudos to Roman and Hughes for working on that. But also, the residents who come and speak have done their homework. We got one letter from one man who talked about, you know, where this was going and the advantages. And with the tree survey, with this new setup, there were 500 trees saved. So my one question is, I know you guys required basically one tree every 10 feet or 5 trees per 50 feet. So do you know, I know we're still losing about 1,900 trees, and I know some of those disease, some of them are elms or whatever. But how many trees do you have to put in to put your trees around the PRD? For non-existing tree lines and fence rows and,
Big number.
Well, street trees,
well, not street trees, I'm thinking really the surrounding trees.
oh, in the perimeter?
But, well, actually, the street trees would be additional
I
trees.
mean, if we're talking total trees, we're getting close to probably 600-700 trees is my guess.
Okay.
With all of the trees that are required around the perimeter, the street trees, the trees that are required on lot, as part of the, you know, the on-lot landscaping requirements, and then, you know, ultimately what we're gonna end up, you know, augmenting the pond areas and open space areas and other things, we're gonna have a significant number of trees.
And I appreciate that. And for rural residential and for suburban residentials, you know, somebody could buy the lot and take all the trees down and the township has nothing to say about it. So the one thing about a PRD, it does protect it. Like I said, I live on a rural residential lot and I like living there. Okay. So, we talked about that. The Ohio Revised Code talks about safety, morals, and all that. I always wonder what morals is. Morals really relates to how you live, and you guys have said how you live. And I think one of the things that's most important for Roman L. Hughes is, you know, you like the outdoor, you know, this type of environment. And what they need to do is get to close as a rural residential feel, still doing a, you know, planned residential development that when you look at it, it doesn't look like a big development. It still lets you when you're looking from your house for those that butt up to it or something like that, there is a 100-foot setback and stuff like that. So I would hope you're doing mounding too. Will there be a lot of mounding to kind of keep this subdivision back?
We'll do mounding out front.
Yeah, and there'll be mounding out front. When I looked at this, where we currently are, if there was a gross density of 1.28, if you just cut this up into lot sizes, they're 3/4 of an acre lots. Of course, that's no roads. If there were roads, it'd be 0.61 would be the lot size. And what they do is, for net density, they take 15% out, and they take all the wetlands out. And then that's why that acreage number is lower than the overall acreage number. If they went down to, let's say, 1.2, a gross density and 1.5 net, for gross, it'd be if you cut it up and it was just squares, it'd be 0.85 acres per lot. If you're looking at the whole thing. And then net, it would still be 2/3 of an acre. Now they're still gonna have small lots, but this is relationship, how many houses are actually in there, if that helps at all. So my question is, I know you guys have looked at this plan, and I compliment you on getting where you were from where you were, but how can we make this more rural residential? What kind of things can you do so these people feel like, yeah, this does have the rural residential feel? I compliment the parks, leaving the trees and all that, and I know we can't get rid of all the cars, but what else can you do?
I mean, we have really undergone a lot of effort to hit those conservation development standards. And at this point, like David said, I don't know that anybody else has ever done that in the township. And I think that's as close to what a planned development is ever gonna feel like in terms of rural residential. We've got some very large setbacks. We're preserving a majority of the site's trees. Those are gonna remain as open space. As you mentioned, rural residential, there's no guarantee of that. You know, that, like you said, somebody could buy a rural residential lot, they could cut down most of the trees because they want to have a large front yard for their kids to play. So we're doing things that probably are different than a rural residential, but I would argue potentially more benefit because we're preserving those trees in perpetuity. Nobody can cut them down. None of the homeowners. The homeowners association can't go in and cut them down and make a soccer field. You know, we're doing everything we can to work with and preserve the nature that's there. The wetlands, you know, the streams, the woodlands. To me, there's a lot of benefit in developing the site this way versus doing a rural residential. And as you mentioned, you know, when you're driving down the road, 170 feet setback off the road with mounding and all of the screening that's required, you're really not going to experience this from Rome Corners Road very much.
Well, and the other thing I'd say, Jim, is that, Mr. Carter, is that, you know, so we cut 5 or 10 lots on your density issue. These people aren't going to be happy with that. I mean, that still doesn't get, they want the status quo to remain here. And you're absolutely right, and Gary is absolutely right about what RR means, rural residential means, in terms of 2-acre lots spread throughout this development as people see fit, some public roads, no preservation of trees at all or anything. Drainage will have to be dealt with because you got to file a subdivision with the county, so we got the same issues that we got to make sure we protect.
Still have stormwater ponds.
Yep, well, you have to do that. I mean, all that can be done. But you're right, there's no way to preserve all that's being preserved in what I call an open zoning category, whatever it might be. Only planned zoning categories address this. And the other thing we haven't talked about, it was mentioned earlier, is the patio homes that are, you know, about 50% of this development, those don't drive school children. And the statistics demonstrate that those people don't follow traffic in terms of they're not going to work in the morning, they're not coming home at night. They're smart enough to know when the roads are less traveled for them to have better access to the sorts of things they want to do. And Gary's absolutely right. A lot of their day is spent walking these trails we're going to have and those sorts of things. So while we have a good traffic study and we believe in the traffic study and we support it, the statistics demonstrate that no kids go to school, very few kids go to schools from that sort of housing stock, and people don't travel.
You know, having run a referendum and been against the high density for a long time here, I called the superintendent of Olentangy Schools, and much to my surprise, he agreed with what you're saying, is that they like these developments because those people pay taxes, but they don't send their kids to school.
Right, yep.
And that's something that, it's a learning curve for me. Now, that doesn't mean that in your family sites, there aren't gonna be kids in there, but there is. But to my point is, what's nice is, from the last plan to this plan, there were 62 homes that were back-to-back. So there were 31 pairs. Now there's 26 homes that are back-to-back, 13, because my first concern is the current residents. The next is the residents that move in. And I think what I've looked at is, this area up here where you've got little places like that and that, up here in the parklands and all that, the only place that I see that, people aren't, the people that are going to move in aren't going to have the rural residential is right here. And I just think, there's, if you took, I think it's 12.
Back-to-backs.
The back-to-backs, basically, because they're, even though they may be ruining what some of these people don't like, they want to live in a nice area too. And if we can, this would do two things: reduce, some of this. And if these were out and we extended this park, then we've done a lot of good for a lot of things and made it really more of a rural residential thing. And to your point, where these people aren't going to change their mind, I don't know. I think, we've got a pretty good group of people here in Genoa Township to do a lot of research. And I get the not in my backyard, without a doubt. But it's also what you guys have come a long way, and they respect you, like some people mentioned, and all that stuff. So I don't know if
Oh, and
that's.
by the way, I
No.
respect them too, and we're just
Oh,
trying to
no.
work
Oh,
through
I
this
didn't say you didn't
process.
that. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I believe our residents do listen.
Yeah.
And I understand their point. I live in rural residential too.
Right.
So,
By the way,
is that a,
I always sometimes feel in these things like people think I live under a rock somewhere. I live in a home somewhere, and I care what goes on around me too, so.
okay. Is that something that's a possibility?
I think part of the challenge that we've had, and I've gone over this site plan, I don't know, 14, 15 times. We have real constraints because we are bounded by wetlands in certain areas. So we just have no room to push things, roads, streets, in any more directions that we have. So there isn't really a way to get additional separation between the back-to-back of those houses without pushing a street into a wetland here or pushing the other lots into the wetland there.
I'm just suggesting they go away. If you took this.
Now we get down to it. Now we get down to it.
Yeah,
I was
well,
trying to
in case
avoid
I
that
wasn't
question,
clear,
Steve.
I know, that's.
I was trying to avoid
I'm just
that.
saying, these right here, then if this park just fills in this area, all these people look out on nice areas, and that's sort of a rural residential plan development look for them. Here, these people do not. And, it would help on a lot of bases, and you could eliminate the street here, I believe. Part of that T Street, I don't know if that's how much money that saves you, but, that would give it, not only would help with the traffic issue slightly, but it would also, anyways, it would, make a rural residential thing, because people do move to Genoa Township for that reason. And even though they would be moving into a PRD and maybe they want a smaller lot rather than a big lot, I know there are a lot of retirees that move there.
Jim, I think you know us well enough that we'll always continue to work with you and try to.
I mean, you've
come up with
demonstrated
something
that, and I just think it's important that we answer the questions. There's some misconceptions on some of the rules of the road here, but, I don't know. Is that something you want to think about a minute, or do you want to get back to us?
Maybe
Let's
there's
just keep
other,
going.
Some other questions.
yeah, see
Okay.
if there's other things.
Not cutting more than 15 feet away. What's the advantage of cutting farther away? Maybe Jim?
So just in terms of, if you look at typical lots, when we're coming into a site like this, especially a flat site like that, your stormwater, when you look at a house, your stormwater is gonna be, front yards are moving towards the front, the backyards are moving towards the back. So there has to be a way to get a stormwater management system in the back of these lots, which is done through storm sewers along the back. So in order to put those in, you gotta clear trees in order to get them. Especially on our move down empty nester product up on the north side. Those are all by design. It's it is higher density because we're doing is we're putting a house where people don't want to have big yards to maintain because we're going to be maintaining it as a homeowners association. So all your stormwater is going to be when you look at any plans that comes through now, all your stormwater is going to be in the back of the yards, and then it's going to be filtering towards the pond where it's then cleaned and then released into the system. So.
Do you have any
we need
idea how many, do
stormwater.
you have any idea how many trees that involves by giving that divergence? I mean, if you
I
don't, that's
couldn't-
fine, but
yeah,
I'm
I
just,
couldn't tell you. I mean, we've moved to the site and have really attempted to move it away from the
I know you
trees.
have,
It's
yeah.
been, that's been by
Yeah.
design.
because sometimes
If
with it.
if you look at the tree survey, and you look at the areas that they've removed, they've essentially accounted for the removal of all the trees on the lots themselves already. So we could potentially, as we go through the final engineering, find areas where we don't need to extend stormwater and actually save some of those trees. But all of those trees have been kind of accounted for already in the number that they put together, because they made the assumption that everything within the lot was going to be disturbed.
Sometimes for a divergence, what's nice is like if we give you the divergence, you'll give us something. Is there could you plant more trees somewhere else to make up for the ones that were taken for that stormwater thing? Is that I know you're
Yeah, I
already
mean,
putting a lot of trees in
we're
there.
already planting a considerable number of trees in there,
Yeah.
and, we're going to have more trees to come even, because we're going to have, again, trees around the stormwater basin,
Sure, okay.
some of those things. Yeah.
And to go back to your back-to-back, I mean, it is, if you see from the original plans, we took your comments to heart. The other thing about a subdivision like this, and we talk about these parks and these arboretums and these walking trails and all these things that all require, we have a certain number of residents that are all going to share in that cost. And as we continue to lose lots and take this out of there, it just becomes more and more of a burden on the residents themselves as you go through here. So that's a big part of it as well. There's a lot of ground to maintain on this site. We love it. I think it's going to be amazing, but there's a lot of ground to maintain on these sites. And we are looking at maybe 26 lots that are back-to-back. Out of the whole subdivision, out of 165 lots, we've got 26, which I think we did a great job on that.
Yeah, okay.
The other thing on the trees is you're cutting the path through the one area, right?
Not through the trees, though. Yeah, we're going through the trees, but we're not going through trees. Yeah.
Not
We're-
cutting down trees. to
The
create paths.
advantage that we have over there, because we have a tree survey now, we know where each of those trees are located. And then when we actually do those, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll go out in the field with the construction guys, and we'll say, okay, let's shift this path this way, let's avoid this tree, or this looks better, let's run it through this way. So we can really customize that experience as we go out in the field.
Since we're going to kind of move along while we discuss this, Mr. Fisher, fee simple lot. I've heard it, I pretty much know the definition. What is it? What is a fee simple lot versus a condo lot?
Well, that's an
You
interesting.
actually own it?
Excuse me? Yeah, you own the lot. You own the lot. So there's a subdivision plat filed in lot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You own lot 6, and that's where you build your home.
That's a fee simple lot, okay.
You actually receive a deed for it versus a condo. You actually receive a deed for it versus a condo.
Right.
It's governed by ORC.
Right,
There's a
right.
section that decides.
Well, and
how-
what Mr. Schaefer was referring to is there have been condominium developments from time to time, and sometimes in Delaware County, because of the requirements of the Delaware County engineer, even if you have a fee simple lot, sometimes you put a condominium on it. We won't be doing that. He only requires that on private streets. These are all public streets. And I could get into a big technical discussion about that,
No.
but
Yeah,
there's
sure.
no condominiums here. There's no need for condominiums here. There's a homeowners association and there's a sub-association.
Okay.
Everybody owns their lot.
One of the residents mentioned that the traffic coming out was going to shine their lights at one of the houses. I just see one of them. I know you've done this before, mound their front yard for
we'll
them
do
and put
that.
some trees in so they don't get.
Yep.
And I don't know if the driveway would need to be adjusted or not. It doesn't look like it, but if you could look at that, that'd be great. Small thing, on the,
That's an agreement between you and the homeowner. If you're going to look at that.
Yep, we are.
That is not a prerequisite of us discussing
Okay,
this.
yep.
Okay,
We've
yeah.
done that many times. in
Okay,
township,
yeah, I know
other ones.
you've done it
Yep.
before and everything, okay. On the gravel paths, do you put landscaping fabric under that so that they don't mush down into the soil after a couple of years and get weeds?
Yeah, in our detail, we typically do.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's all I got.
Sebastian?
So I see a lot of improvements from last time, and I appreciate that a lot. Definitely, first of all, the acreage. It's now a consistent 129.5 throughout the whole document. The existing wooded areas. Last time, a lot of areas of the wooded areas were had to make space for the retaining ponds and the building lots. Now, you saved a lot of that. I think I'll also appreciate that a lot. About the trails, I had a big comment about like a lot of the PRDs. Sometimes I just see all the common open space as sort of leftover space, and I think you did a great job in trying to actually like make something interesting for these future residents. Also, like I know that people who live around there are not allowed on there, but I'm sure there's not going to be a police agent there, and I'm sure you can just walk in there. So I think it would definitely be great features. Definitely also making use of the wooded areas that you have there, and I think hopefully more developers will do this in the future. On the densities, I know this is not rural residential, and I know you fall under the old code, but I think knowing that you could do a 2.2 density, I think a 1.62 is a fair assessment of you guys. I think that's, you've been trying to reduce that. I mean, I hope it might reduce a little bit more. I think divergence 2 might allow for that, because I think there's still quite a few lots on divergence 2 that are in conflict with the intersection. So maybe there you can get rid of one or move someone. I will come back to that here in a minute. The telecommunications tower, so it's finally kind of shown on the plan. It's not like really drawn in. There is a circle there, but the only thing I had a question about is, maybe this is for Joe, but do they have to like, do you have to do screening for this telecommunication tower? Because I know that our codes, I mean, I don't know if this is only for new cell phone towers that are planned, but in Article 22, Section 2204, it kind of talks about like screening the tower and fencing around it. I don't know if that's applicable
Yeah.
here.
I interpret that language, which is largely derived from statute, in terms of what our rights and capabilities are as a township. I interpret that to apply to any newly proposed towers. This is a tower that's been existing there for many years, so I think the fact that the area around it is changing, I don't think we could go back and retroactively require the tower to comply with new, up-to-date law.
Yeah.
It's not the first time we've had this situation. There's a tower in one of our existing PRDs down across the street from like the middle school. I can't remember the street off the top of my head, but we have an existing, I mean, it's one of those like, you may not even remember that it's there because it's just been there and it just blends into the scenery after a while. But so this not be the first time we had a PRD that sort of got, I don't know if in that instance the PRD or the tower came first, but I would view this tower sort of as an existing feature, and I don't really foresee Article 22 getting triggered by anything here since it's already there.
There is an existing fence around the tower now, yeah.
Is it like, I have not seen really a
I'm pretty
picture
sure
of
it's,
it,
I'm
so-
pretty sure it's the standard chain link.
Okay.
Yeah, fence to
And
keep
would be-
people out from climbing on the tower.
And do you think you will do some like greenery around it, or is that not like possible because of the easement?
I think we can landscape around it as long as we control the ground. I mean,
Okay.
I think we could put some additional landscaping in there. I don't think that's an issue.
And that's certainly something I think at final, if this application would get there, that's something we could probably look at it in more detail, would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Hey, Paul, can you bring up, where's Paul? Oh, there he is. Can you bring up our presentation again? I want to go back to that. That's perfect, thank you. Go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I'm fine about telecommunication, but if you want to say something about it, that's
No,
great.
it wasn't the telecommunication. I think you said you were going to come back to the divergence.
Yeah,
so I
I'm going
wanted
to go
talk
back to
about
that.
Yes.
So divergence one, you ask for a divergence so you can design a PRD under the old zoning code standards since you applied for the zoning since you applied before the zoning resolution was changed. I'm not sure what we all think, but I mean, don't we have in our code already 107.06 that kind of already allows this? I mean, I don't know if they have to ask for a divergence if it's something that our code allows.
It was just to just memorize, memorialize, monument, the fact that they get that version. It's our
It's just weird,
understanding that,
it's just weird that you ask a divergence because it's not something.
it's understanding that that's already there, but the divergence just is
It
ironclad
wouldn't be
that
as
it's
much
there.
the code changes you just made, but 2 years from now or 5 years from now, if you change your code again, while we're in the midst of development, we're saying,
Yeah.
this is what we all agreed to. We should allow this development to proceed and complete out based upon the code that was in place when we
Okay.
came
It's
in.
also one of the reasons that we have them put the full wording of the code in.
Okay, yeah.
And the responses, so it's in the development plan versus if we look back at some very old plans,
Yeah.
you can't figure out what they were applied to.
Okay.
Generally, how that's been administered also is if the applicant would come back later in a few years and need to file a development plan amendment, they've always done that with the understanding that the code that exists at the time of the amendment application will apply to whatever they're asking to have changed. But I agree with Mr. Leff. It's basically memorializing things, in a few years, if I'm not sitting in this chair, the commission members have changed. Everyone can understand exactly what we did and what the rules were, because you don't want, and especially the applicant, doesn't want someone else sitting in this chair who has a completely different interpretation and them saying, well, we had an agreement, and then they say, well, you didn't write it down, so sorry, tough
Well, I
luck.
also think it's important that if you look at the history of planned development districts, why they were created in the state of Ohio, and why they work is, as I was explaining earlier, it's effectively a contract of zoning. Unlike what I call an open category, like an RR or a state residential, something like that, where there's 2 pages of zoning and there's all this, what about trees? What about this? What about that? Everything's here. So that should be the contract under which we all operate going forward.
Diversions two then. I also had actually like a page that I colored them in. Might be just easier to view them here.
Yep.
These would be all the lots that are, that would be across from the intersection, right? There was like an uncertainty about.
I was just trying to do that when I was trying to find the map, so.
I think there's still a possibility for some of these to get away, like, for instance, like lot number 6. I mean, I don't know if that's a possibility because of the traffic study that's already in place, but like you could move, like leave lot 6 out, move it between 74 and 75, and then move your whole entryway up. That also might also make it that the entryways doesn't shine as much in that house across the street. I don't know if that's a possibility to change, but there's probably a few, like, I mean, you have some rest space here. You can probably move a little bit here to have lesser of these units.
I want to talk about this for a second, because this is really important, and I want to talk about the divergence itself. Paul, can you go back to my presentation? So if you, I'm gonna stand up here real quick, and just because I can't use the laser on this, but one of the things, so this is a provision that appears in codes throughout Delaware County, lots of different townships, and everybody kind of interprets it a little bit differently, I think. But when you look at kind of the purpose for this code, it's a public safety issue, right? And the issue is primarily that when you don't want, when somebody is here and is going to pull out into traffic, you don't want the visibility blocked by a car sitting in a driveway right here. You want them to be able to see down the intersection, That really isn't an issue or an impact for any of the lots across the street. So these lots across the street aren't really impacted by that. And when you read your code, I don't think it really shows up here. It's a little too fuzzy, but the code even talks about areas along the contiguous. No driveway shall be located so it enters a public road within 40 feet of the intersection of the edge of the contiguous right-of-way of any 2 public roads. So if you zoom back out, Paul, So this is the contiguous right-of-way. This is the uninterrupted contiguous right-of-way. So for sure, we know that that applies to these corner intersections. And the reason is because we don't want cars sitting here, that a car sitting here waiting to turn left or turn right can't see oncoming traffic. These houses aren't impacted by that. And in fact, if you take this street away, then these houses are just houses on a street like any other, right? It doesn't really make a difference. And having this intersection here doesn't impact the safety of these at all, because anybody coming here is going to stop at a stop sign. And so if somebody is backing out of the street, these folks backing out still have to contend with the traffic going this way or this way. But this guy stopped. He's seeing what's going on. So there's really no conflict between this guy and this guy, which is why some people interpret it as just being the corners, the actual corners. And I think, you know, the township here has taken a different interpretation, but which is why I think, you know, we've asked for the divergence, because from a public safety standpoint, there really is no impact to these lots.
I mean, you could say that there is some impact. I mean, still this lot will have, like, safety-wise, still have a bigger issue to get out of his lot when there's another car potentially coming from above.
But that car is stopped. That's not ongoing, that's not oncoming traffic. That car is stopped at that intersection.
I'm gonna slightly disagree with that, just in general. Number one,
Sure.
we've done this with a number of other developments, and we've made it push away from that intersection. So if you've got a driveway directly across from the intersection, it's now, people could think of that as a four-way. Or we get into self-driving issues, and and the car thinks that's a continuation of the road. So that center line where we've had a divergence before, it's never been 100%. It's been a push off, and so that driveway is offset from the intersection.
Yeah,
So
we
it's
could do
a
that.
natural-
We just
not
talked
only-
about
Not only do you have a stop sign and a stop line, but then there's actually a curb and grass in front of you, not a driveway directly across from you.
Jim Olin and I
Okay.
just talked about that as Gary's representing. We can agree on those lots that the driveway is at the furthest end of the lot away from the intersection. So you're right, somebody's not backing out in the
Okay.
middle of where.
The third
We
part, my third part was just that, is you've got somebody in a driveway, they're backing out, all of a sudden, you've got an intersection where somebody can be coming through. So that's why that rule is there, and our interpretation my interpretation of that, from all the years we've been doing this now, has been just that. So we don't want to have something directly across from that intersection, which is why we think that impact is there.
So
I
we
understand what
make-
you were
yeah,
saying.
We'll make,
The other
we'll
one-
we'll make, we'll
but-
we'll make the divergence contingent upon that those driveways will be not directly across from the intersection. They'll be at the far end of those lots. We
Okay,
can do that.
so then my question is, what percentage of a divergence are we going to talk about? Because the way the divergence is worded right now, it's 100% divergence. And that's where my concern would be if I'm gonna do 100%. So if you're gonna tell me it's 40 feet, but I would need a 50% divergence, now I'm talking about 20 feet. All right, there's a happy medium here for a divergence to meet this, but I am not gonna be good with 100%.
Okay, yeah, so we just, I mean, those lots, well, there's different sized lots. We'll just have to figure out what
How
the
many
different
lots
sized lots
were
are.
impacted?
Slide some.
Okay.
Right?
I think it was more than that.
But there's different, there's got the patio home lots that are narrower than the single family lots. We'll just figure what the dimension is.
I got 9. I didn't count your top 2 because you pretty much had a
Well, I
A
mean,
lot
that's
line
what they
there.
put in, actually.
Huh?
They actually mentioned those in their own plan, so
Yeah.
I just colored them, that's all I did.
So 11. Oh, that's yours or theirs?
That's mine, I put
That's
it red,
yours.
but they had a little, I don't know, what do you call that?
All
an
right, I had
asterisk.
9, you've got 11.
Yeah, that's
So
what I was trying to,
that's,
that's what I was trying to
okay.
get to.
Yeah.
Yep, we got you.
Okay.
We can work on that.
Sebastian, sorry.
Sorry, divergence number 3, yeah. Yeah, the tree clearing, yeah, I would still do an effort in also clearing as less trees and putting as much in the open area. Just don't keep it too much, only just grass areas. Do an effort in
Yeah.
putting a lot of the trees that you clear back in the.
And once again, we're not trying to accomplish anything from divergence 3. It's your code has conflicting language in it.
Oh, I understand. That's it for me.
I guess my questions, most of them have been answered so far or are still on the table as questions. And I did have a question regarding not wanting to, divergence 3, not wanting to adhere to the 15 feet. My other one that I still have is, having our council's input on the contingency zoning plan, which erring on the side of caution, I always like our attorney input. So I have a little bit of concern because I think we're seeing things maybe from a little bit different angle. And I want to protect our township.
And by the way, that was simply an accommodation to try to address. We're happy to take that language out. It doesn't help us at all. I was simply trying to address Joe's comment that he didn't want a long-term orphan PRD zoning in here. So whatever your council says is fine with us.
So, and that was all derived off of the sewer, I think that's sort of been brought up a couple times already during the course of this conversation. Now, as I look at sort of the response I got from the regional sewer director, it sounds like they're gonna be able to get north from Jaycox one way or the other, whether it's in the 71 right-of-way or whether they acquire easements from the properties adjacent to the 71 right-of-way and/or a mixture of both. They're gonna be able to do that. I was concerned about getting from 71 east, but now as I look back at the plans, I originally thought there was a handful of lots they would have to get through, but now I realize they're actually going through the southern portion of the Hill property, which butts up all the way against 71, and then coming down into the Glass property, which prior to a couple iterations ago was part of this PRD, so I would assume the Glass property is probably on board with that plan. So at that point, it's really just a question of the Hales and securing the northward trajectory. But like I said, the sewer people have given me the impression that if they can't get the easements to go north, putting it in the 71 right-of-way is feasible. And I was reviewing that as part of the conversation here. So I think my concern about the whole orphan PRD thing is significantly lessened by the fact that there's not as much impact. I'd prefer that language just come out. I'm not as, candidly, not as sure about whether we could do the reverter anyway, although Mr. Fisher is the attorney in the room, but I think it'd be better just to come out in its entirety.
By the way, better for us if it's out. And also, I'd say, we wouldn't be here tonight, we wouldn't be this far along, and we wouldn't have worked this many months if we didn't think we were gonna have sanitary sewer for this project.
And I guess, thank you so much for doing the revisions that have been done. I think in protecting our neighbors and friends in the township, as well as trying to not hinder a farmer or a property owner in selling their property, we need to look at some smart developments. And I think there's been some questions that have stirred tonight as to how might this be a little bit better, so it's a little more palatable for the neighbors. I understand Ohio Revised Code. I've spent a lifetime working in and around it with zoning and development, but we do need some respect for our neighbors and their opinions in where they stand in the township. And so I think, if we can make things somehow a little bit more palatable, I think it helps everyone.
We absolutely get this process.
I know
mean,
you do.
We know
That's
that-
what you do
that-
for a living, I get that, but.
No, but we
this is
very
where
much
these people
respect
live,
what people are saying, and we want to try to accommodate as much as we can.
And we really do feel Genoa Township is a special little
It is.
place. Genoa Township is really a special, nice little place off to the side.
I read that
and-
sign every time I drive in here, and I drive in here a lot. I
Good.
know, I see it all the time.
So I think there's still, a few things on the table with questions and concerns, not many. I think we're getting there, but I'd like a little more maybe tweaking in answers and things that we can maybe look at to decide how this could move forward, maybe without as many divergences and things of that nature. We're talking about bots, we're talking about
I'm
some,
not sure I can get rid of any more divergences. I got 3 now. I started off with 5 or 6. 2 of them are highly technical, and the other one, we just agreed with the chair that we'll split those driveways away from the intersection. We'll give you the percentage of divergence on that. I just don't think I can get rid of any more divergences.
Sure. So I'll call it what it is. And I respect everybody's opinion in where they stand in this process. Residents, the commission, I get it. This comes down to dollars and cents. I mean, when it's all said and done, the changes that my fellow commissioners have talked about and the residents have talked about, you have to make it financially viable to do. I get that. And so ultimately, I think that's what the question is on the table right now, when you really boil it down, is what can Romanelli and Hughes do to make this project financially viable, yet still get as close to the rural residential feel as much as possible that the residents want. I also understand where the residents are coming from, that they want to keep it 2-acre lots, et cetera, et cetera. In some respects, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. And you know, Mr. Carter, you alluded to that. You know, there are some distinct advantages to the PRD in terms of being able to preserve things and control within the zoning code what the development looks like. And so that all being said, I mean, the divergences don't give me cause for concern. I mean, I am an attorney. I know you got your application in before the zoning code changed. There's not a damn thing we can do about that. That's Ohio law. There's nothing I can do about that. I don't think you need a divergence on that issue, but that's not for me. I mean, if you ask for it, and we vote on it. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. I agree with the issue about the driveways and the intersections or the T intersections. That's, to me, is a safety concern that needs to be addressed, and it sounds like it will be addressed. You know, the trees, the 15-foot whatever, yeah, I'd like to see as many trees stay as possible, but I also don't want to see water backfilling into people's basements because we're trying to save a tree, but yet not do proper drainage to get the water away from the base. And I realize some of them are patio homes, which then begs the question of, do you really have to remove the tree to keep the drainage flowing? I don't know. I'm not an arborist. I'm not that type of engineer. I hate to say this, but I mean, no matter how we vote, whether we vote tonight or not, if you don't like our decision, you can go to the Board of Trustees and they have the ultimate say. I mean, and I don't mean that to be defeatist or whatnot, but I mean, if we vote it down, it still goes to the Board of Trustees. If we vote it up, it still goes to the Board of Trustees. I mean, we are one step in the process. And so
I think what you mentioned about, you know, dollars and cents and, you know, getting, you know, really having this talk about how we can make it more rural is a good point of why we're here. And, you know, I think we're going down exactly the right road. Yeah.
I don't disagree with
Yeah.
you. But that's a decision for, I guess, Mr. Olwen ultimately to comprehend or to contemplate is a correct word. So I've said my piece. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'd also say that it's not our goal, it is our goal to hopefully arrive at consensus with you and to have a recommendation, an affirmative recommendation to the trustees. So you're absolutely right, Mr. Welch. We could do it that way, but, you know, we're not, and you guys, especially Mr. Carter's been, you know, I'm not a guy that's gonna come in here and beat on my chest and threaten and cajole and do all these. We wanna work with you to get as far as we can.
And I'm
as
not
far as we
saying that
can.
Mr. Romanelli would take that stance or anything like that. I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form. Is denigrating to Mr.
No,
Romanelli.
I didn't take it that way. And the other comment I want to make, that this first divergence, it's not about the code changes that have occurred during the pendency of this application. Because I think your lawyer has consulted you, and I've read from Mr. Schaefer. What we're really trying to address is future changes to the code down the road, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now. That's what we're trying to address by that divergence.
So that, I guess that begs my last question. what's the time frame here? I mean, I realize you gotta get sewer before, I mean, you can't put in a basement or a foundation until you got sewer to tap into, but I mean, realistically, if all gets green lighted from here on out, when are you turning ground?
We go to full-scale engineering for this project as soon as we have unappealable zoning. And that's probably a 6-month process, Jim?
Engineering will take a minimum of 10 months on the project.
10 months?
Yeah.
So we would be, and that's including going through all the application processes with subdivision approvals from the county coming back into you for final development plan. So a year from now, a year from that final unappealable zoning, we'd be starting.
I'm tapping out, I'm done. I've asked my questions, thank
A
you.
little bit of history. The question was brought up earlier. I'm gonna attribute it to Randy, but whoever brought it up.
Randy Rocky?
Was about the comp plan and the numbers and when things came out. You know, there were, due to a lawsuit that occurred here in the township, we had to take a hard look at what was in the comp plan versus what was in the zoning resolution. The only thing that was enforceable was what was in the zoning resolution. We, as a board, receive an application from anybody who has the right to submit an application, pay the fee, and we will hear that case. And we have to hear it within a certain period of time because that's what's required by the ORC. We then review that application against the zoning resolution, okay? Now, Mr. Carter will argue to his heart content in here, and that's perfectly fine, that he believes that the comprehensive plan numbers were enforceable standards, but we were told otherwise from a lawyer perspective. So that process that took the numbers out of the comp plan were to make them homogeneous, okay? We homogenized, thank you, my brain not working. The zoning resolution and the comp plan. That allowed us to have, because we could not have more than one density in different areas in the zoning resolution. It had to be enforceable all across the board. We then took major steps within the zoning resolution to put in setbacks and other requirements that then would have lessened the total densities by putting additional requirements in for any of those properties zoned. We continued to do that. We then came up with the Hoover Watershed Overlay, which came into effect just after this was submitted the first date, okay? We then have gone back again, which is what we just went through and was now approved by the Board of Trustees, an additional modification that lowered the overall numbers, but put numbers back in the comp plan with the reference that we would basically accept divergences up to those numbers. If I speak poorly on this, you're going to stop me, right? Okay, there you go. So we have gone through all of that to get to where we are with a density perspective, but that removal from the comp plan was specific because of the lawsuit and what was enforceable and what we, as a group, are only allowed to review an application under, which is the zoning resolution. Okay, so I just want to state that those are the numbers, those are the facts, that's what we've done. And if anybody says any different, they didn't listen to all those meetings, okay? So that's where all that came from. We put in those setbacks because there was a desire to have that rural residential feel. We wanted to make sure we had a nice place to live, and we met those standards, we thought, and we still think that, I believe. I'll opinionize myself on that one, that those setbacks allow for that to fall in place here in the township. So if we kept it RR, as Mr. Carter said, be careful, because there are allowances for building accessory structures up to 10 feet of a property line in a rural residential.
Yes.
And that has been done in numerous cases. So you could be living next to this property and all of a sudden somebody builds a 30,000 square foot barn based on this lot size that they have if this were to be subdivided, and it could be 10 feet from your property line.
Yeah, and I'll say our office gets calls and complaints about
Yes.
people building stuff on the large lot subdivision. We've got one, I don't want to name names, we've got a couple in the township of governing calls from people, and these are large lots, large homes, but you know, the trees are all going away, the fence is real close to the line, the accessory building's really large. So I feel like sometimes there's this false notion that the 2-acre lot size is going to be protective, and it just, that's not always the case, and it's frustrating for staff because we sit here and we hear about keep it 2 acres, and then we sit in our offices during the day and we get calls and complaints from people who live next to these big homes that are being developed on 2 acres, and people are still upset. So at some degree, we've got to find that balance and just understanding that things are going to change, things are going to impact people. I mean, I'm not, I obviously don't take a stance for or against these developments, but I will say, I understand this is different. What they're proposing here is fairly different from what's all around it. I get that.
Yes.
Fairly obvious. But what they're asking for is no different than what Sheffield Park asked for when it was the first PRD to come up this way, and that was all farm field around that, or Walnut Grove, or, I mean, you could just march further down south. I mean, all the land in Genoa, I've looked at the historical aerial imagery, looked a lot like what this land looks like right now. At some point, someone was the first. Now, I'm not saying that this is the right one to change that, but the comp plan does recommend PRD within certain provisions. And the zoning resolution does anticipate PRD, or it does have the regulations for PRD. So, I mean, from a zoning district standpoint, this fits. If sewer's there, they're asking for PRD, the comp plan does say, yes, we should entertain PRD here if there's sewer there. Because once sewer's in an area, and I've said this during the other meetings in the comp plan and the zoning resolution amendment meetings, the ability of the township to defend 2-acre lot zoning when sewer is available is just, you're not going to be able to defend that. And Pete Griggs even said that during the trustees hearing. You can't defend that.
That's because of the Ohio Revised Code.
Yes.
Yes.
Ohio's a very pro-property right state, which is great, but it also means those property owners have a lot of rights in terms of what they can do and subdivide and develop their property.
Thank you.
Chairman, I would ask for you to possibly address, and maybe it's inappropriate, but I think it would help, is that we do take notes and we do read every email. We do hear about every single call that comes in regarding every single application that we listen to, because we do care. We're not here because we don't care, we do care. But maybe you can address that we also have to stay within the rails of the Ohio Revised Code and what we can and cannot do as a zoning commission. Unfortunately, sometimes, and it seems unfortunate sometimes to people.
Yeah.
If you'd like to address.
And I tried to say that a little bit earlier, was that, again, a submission comes in, we get it, we have a certain time frame to review it, and we are only allowed to look at that and what is in the zoning resolution. And we compare those two and whether or not things fit. Where we do have some subjectivity is whether or not the divergence meets the standard, or where we are willing to accept certain things from a divergence perspective. But if somebody were to bring something in and it meets every single thing in that zoning resolution with no divergence, we're gonna ask questions, we're gonna do some things, and then we get to vote on a recommendation. But it's the trustees in the ultimate case of being able to determine whether or not it fits or not. We are looking at it from a resolution perspective, okay? So.
Through some of the craziness of all those, densities and lawsuits and all that, the good thing is we did get those setbacks. And those were big.
Absolutely.
Having that extra 100 foot, the original Vinmar and the second Vinmar only had 50 foot.
Yes.
And to get that 100-foot setback for all the rural residential people, that did get in there, thank goodness for that, and then the other 170 foot, and all the requirements to maintain things. I mean, it really does help. I mean, there are places for rural residential without a doubt. We have Britton Wood worked out for somebody, and, it all depends on, a developer, and, Mulberry over here is gonna be a 6-person, rural residential thing. But it depends on the land, depends on the developer, depends on the rights of the landowners and all that sort of stuff. And that's, to what Ms. Roush said, was, to get a plan like this, and hopefully we can get it refined a little farther, so it's really a rural residential PRD in essence for all. And to get the setbacks is not a bad thing. I mean, so, and and we've just we did the big Walnut Courtyard, and they came in at 2.09 or something like that. So if it was a 0.5 more, that means it would have been 85 more houses in this if you got like an EPCON to come in or something like that. So those are all the things we look at, and I know it's still disappointing. I know you guys like your rural residential, and I get it. He's got a question.
So the 40-foot setback, you're going to talk some more about how that looks. We're
Yeah,
going to look
yeah,
at
we'll
the
get,
divergence.
we'll
So we're
spread
gonna
that
go-
out, and we'll give you the percentage on that divergence.
So is our discussion now mute earlier from the sewer piece?
Yeah, I've less concern about it. I mean, it'd be nice if we had some sort of documentation that you've got the hails secured, I guess, but,
So. as
or
a
at least
prereq- so pre-
preliminarily.
And I understand, Mr. Fisher, you said earlier you wouldn't have gone down this far if you didn't think you were going to have sewer. There's nothing in this that tells us you have sewer.
Nor is
Okay.
there anything in your code that says I have.
Well, PRD says you have to have sewer.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to get, if you want this rezoned to PRD, you have to have sewer. Right? Okay, so there's two properties, it seems, on there that you've got to run through to get to sewer. Can we get a memorandum of understanding or a letter of intent at this point to move forward? I'm not saying you've got to have easement rights at this moment. That's for final. But in order to even think about this rezoning, you have to have sewer in place. And right now, you don't have sewer in place.
Yeah, Yes, that's your requirement.
So
We'll have
you,
to meet
if
it.
you get an MOU and we have that documented, those two properties, we're gonna be able to go through. If you're coming from the 70, right? It's two properties if you're coming from the
Well, it's-
71.
based on the utility plan drawing, I know you said you had a few different routes you possibly could go.
Whichever route we've got to go to get to you, if it's up from the south coming north, or if it's
But-
coming east from from
But we're in
71.
agreement from the Delaware County engineer that to the extent we use the I-71 corridor, which
Mhm.
they said they would use, that's fine. So it's really coming across.
It's coming across.
Okay.
And you've got a couple properties to get there. So again, I'll be fine with an MOU.
All right.
I don't think we need to go through full easements at this point until we get to final. But as a prerequisite to get to PRD, you gotta have
Okay.
sewer. Okay? You're already gonna remove the zoning reversal language, I'm fine with that. I would love it if you talk to somebody across the street, especially from the northern driveway. It looks
About
like
the
they're gonna
mountain.
be the ones the impacted if there's some impact. The southern one, you can, again, it's always better to have the conversations with the neighbors and come up with some understanding. There's been plenty of work done in the past there. The third part has, with the traffic study, I'm assuming that there was already some sort of assumption that that was gonna be a turn lane piece. Has there been thoughts of how that 3-lane section would work in between the two roads? How much it extends north and south of these intersections?
We
What do
don't have the traffic guys here tonight. They're
Okay.
the ones that run that
Yep.
trap line with the county engineer. As I read the traffic study, I think they're saying it's to be determined.
Well, it could be either two turn
Normally
lanes
something
or a
that's-
full 3-lane all the way.
Yeah, it's
So-
normally something that's sorted out as part of the final engineering.
Yep.
And work with them, yeah. So we'll continue that as we, if, we move forward through the final development plan, final engineering process.
Essentially comes down to if the tapers for the turn lanes overlap, but they won't know that until they get into the final.
Not being an
Engineering.
engineer, though, does that impact, if it is a 3-lane, does that impact your overall acreage for development purpose?
It shouldn't, because we're granting additional right-of-way. There's a total of 80 feet of right-of-way in there. And that's certainly enough to accommodate a 3-lane section.
Okay.
Homes in between the two driveways on the west side of the road, it could impact front lawns at that point.
Well, that's just something that we're gonna have to look through as we go through engineering. I don't think that there's gonna be any impact to those homes, if that's what you're asking.
If you only did the turn lanes, you think?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer either, but I'm pretty sure we can make that work with the amount of right-of-way that we have.
Is it possible for you to throw a line on the drawing, whatever that turn lane distance would be from the intersection, just to see where we see?
Can ask
it
the
might
engineers
be?
to take a look at it.
I would appreciate that, just so we can see where that would be. Other than that, everybody hit my other items.
Mr. Walker have a say-so? just
Do you
so-
have any, what?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you have any other comments or questions for us at this point?
I don't think so.
And then, I imagine we're going for a continuance at this moment. date-wise, we need to talk. There were some concerns about dates.
Well, I mean, I'm on vacation your next meeting. If I gotta come back, I'll come back. So, it's not the end of the world. Be down in South Carolina, I'll just drive back for a couple days from my vacation. And by the way, I think there's so much to be done that,
You can be able, yeah, when can you get?
I guess the only question is, would you allow me, if we did it at your next meeting, would you allow me to attend by Zoom? Do you still allow that or no?
I don't think we're allowed to do that.
I would have to look into whether an applicant could attend by Zoom. I know the commission members can't do it anymore, but I don't know if there's anything necessary precluding an applicant
Well,
from necessarily doing that.
MOUs, because remember, for the next meeting, we have to file.
It's already done. And then Hale is the only, that's the only one I've got.
We have to file for the next meeting, we have to file in how many days, Joe?
Yeah, what's our schedule?
Basically a week from today. Now, I mean, if we're talking about just supplementations, I'm not gonna ask for the whole book again. I mean, from what I'm hearing, it's MOUs, which are just new documents that we would just stick in here. Striking through the line on the text, which is really just sending me a new last page of the final development plan text that we can just insert. The exact degree of the divergence related to the 40-foot, that's probably just editing one page out of the text. And the fact that the signage will comply at final, or you could just go through and just make big blank areas where that signage is and remove the Mira Luna and remove the logo and just leave them blank and just say you not to exceed in total 20 square feet. Because at this stage, I don't want to get bogged down in signage details on a rezoning hearing, so.
Well, I
mean,
think what we prefer to do is just say the signage will comply at final development.
You just, yeah.
That's okay, if that works for you.
I would just
I
remove
think we're
all
down
the
to some pretty
specifications
big
then and
things
leave it
to
more
do at
general.
this point on that.
Well, that's, so how much time do you?
Mr. Schaefer, would a week
what
before?
is-
I mean, yeah, if we're talking about just some supplemental documentation, and if we're willing to, show them some accommodation because we're asking them for some more stuff. I mean, if that's all I'm reviewing, I don't need a ton of lead time. It's more of a question of how much lead time does the commission want and how much time does does the commission want for the public. But in terms of me getting that stuff and reviewing it, my turnaround time, barring any unforeseen circumstances, would be relatively quick.
So is that the second?
5 items, I think.
By June 2nd, then, Friday?
So if we're sticking with the 12th, which is the next regular meeting,
That gives us over a week.
I mean, I'd be fine with, I could do it. If we got it by like the 30th. I usually try to get my memo a week out before your meeting,
Okay.
which would be the 5th. So, if I got it the 30th, I'm
Well,
confident I can get you it all reviewed in a memo and done and completed by the 5th.
So you're saying you're gonna give us more time to?
That's what, to submit because we're only talking about a handful of revisions.
So May 30?
you're saying Tuesday, May 30?
Yeah, so long as the revisions are limited to this 5, 6 things we're talking about and not, if we're starting to talk about wholesale changes beyond these 5 or 6 items, I would need more time to review that.
Let me follow that up with a question. If we did contemplate making changes to the plan, if we got you all of the plan changes by the deadline next week, and then still took a little longer to follow up on the technical things, the 5 things that you were talking about, is that
Actually,
doable?
the technical things are easy to get done by next week. I'm more thinking about if we've gotta make plan
What
changes.
we're contemplating is Mr. Carter's comments.
Okay.
Let's see, so today is the 8th.
That's what I'm contemplating, the ease or if that's something that can be done fairly easy.
No, but if we're doing calculation changes, that's gonna need more time. That's why
Honestly, they gave me a bunch of changes today and I was able to, relatively quickly, within the day, get it. So, if we want to push it back to the 22nd, I could probably do that.
Do we have anything else already submitted for next?
No, we didn't get any rezoning applications for the next meeting. I won't know on any final development or final development plan amendment applications until the 15th. That said, I'm not aware of anything. I'm not expecting to receive anything on the 15th in terms of those, so.
So if they did make plan changes, you feel okay with the 30th then? It's tight.
It's tight, but you know what, I'll make it happen.
And then we'll meet at the regular meeting time.
Like, that's enough time for the public to look at them, for you to look at them. Because it's not just me who's looking at them.
Well, the
30th is basically 2 weeks out from the meeting,
no,
or slightly less because of Memorial Day.
30th, you'd get it out probably by the 5th.
Can I ask you a question? I just had to get some permission from a client. Any chance that you could have this next meeting June 19th when I'm back, as opposed to your normal meeting date? Give us a little more time to get everything in, more time to review. Doesn't work? Okay.
I think the hall is unfortunately not available that evening.
Yeah, that was not one of the dates, and
I'm gonna double check real quick, but
I've got a work trip.
You got a conflict, so that's fine.
and the office is closed anyway because that's the Juneteenth holiday.
Okay. So what's our time, what are we asking for here in terms of the timing for submittal? We got to get the MOUs for the sewer, which we're not worried at all about. We've got to
Tuesday,
get.
May 30th.
Excuse me?
Tuesday, May 30th.
That works for you with a plan revision as well?
We'll get it done.
We'll make, yeah.
Just my review, I'll try to get it done a week ahead of time like I normally try. But I mean, technically speaking, I have up until the moment of the meeting to get it done, so.
That means the whole suite.
Next meeting is the 12th.
I thought.
June 12th is the meeting.
And have everything in by May 30.
4 p.m.
We also have a good list of what is exactly changing, because otherwise we have to go to the whole document if it's like clearly stated.
That does
what-
help a
what-
lot.
If it's clearly stated what is changed.
Thorough one-page
Yeah.
list of everything we've changed.
Yeah, if I don't have to hunt for it, it makes it a lot quicker to review.
Okay.
We will need the alternates on the 12th. I'll be in Alaska.
Okay, I know one of the alternates isn't gonna be here, so it sounds like Mr. Wester will be sitting in then.
You won't be here on the 12th?
I will not.
On what day, the 12th?
June 12th?
12th?
I'll be here.
Okay.
Any other?
I'll be here. I'll be here. You gonna be here?
Sure.
Sorry.
What was the answer? Are all you going to be here? No, you're not going to be here. We got one
We'll have
alternate.
alternate.
But we'll have an alternate here.
Okay, and you'll be here, did you say? Okay, good. Do you want us to make a request, or you
No,
just?
we can, you want
We're
me
gonna,
Okay.
you're gonna do it, you want a continuance?
Whatever, I mean, we agree
Do
with
you
these
want me to
dates.
Yes.
so.
I move to continue the public hearing for the subject application known as Mara Luna, zoning case 2022-6 until 7 p.m. on Monday, June 12th in the Genoa Township Administration Hall. Additional and revised materials will be due to Genoa Township Development and Zoning Department by Tuesday, May 30 at 4 p.m.
I'll second.
Discussion. Mr. Schaefer?
Roll call, Mr. Bernert,
Yes.
Mr. Carter, Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Yes. Motion to continuance concludes this meeting at 9:48 p.m.
Did you have something you wanted to ask?
Well, we gotta,
Well, thought you had to be during the meeting.
Well, it is still during the meeting.
it is
We are-
still
we
during
have
the
not
meeting,
closed
but
the meeting. We
there's a lot of
closed the-
move,
we
there's a lot
closed
of
the hearing.
movement going on.
Where'd you hit the mallet? I am very sorry. As you know, I'm persistent.
All right, we're still in an active meeting. If you take your conversations out in the hall, that'd be great. Thank you. Clint? Stay up. Hang on. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're still in a meeting. If you need to talk, please work out in the hall. Thank you. Thank you.
They thought it was over too.
I understand. All right, we have other business rules of procedure adoption.
Yeah, I sent it to Mr. Fowler for review. Haven't received it back yet, so at
Okay.
this point, I don't have anything to report on it.
Defer on that.
We now have public comment. Clint, you had a question or comment? Is it, I hope. Well, that public comment was closed for that hearing, okay? So here's the thing I'm gonna give you a stipulation on. If it's a general question, you can ask it. If it's specific to that, we can't talk about it, because now that hearing's closed, okay?
Well, that's what I said. They kept talking and they.
But I know, but public comment was closed. So when we
Yeah,
close
but
public.
then it's backwards, see? We get the comment, and then they get to come up here and say, hey, change this and change this. And change this. And then we don't get to comment on it because we went first. If we went last, let them do their thing, and then let us talk, we'd say, hey, like right now.
Well, but you did. They did a presentation, and then we open it up to public comment, and you make your comment. Then we can respond and have conversation, and then it becomes our
Yeah,
conversation.
but
up
once
here.
you guys got going on,
Yep.
you know, you're gonna give them this, they're gonna give you
No,
that.
no.
No,
There's
no, no, no.
Well, I
There's
mean,
no-
okay, can we,
There's no
can we
quid
get
pro quo.
There's no,
There is no
no,
giving.
no.
No.
this done by May 30th? Can we get it done by May 12th? So
Well, those
that-
are
Those are,
just,
those are,
that's
pub-
timing.
those are
I understand.
deadlines.
But I was wanting to know is all this, you know, can you do this, can you do that? It's still a bunch of patio homes with 6-foot side yards. Now, how far from rural residential can you get? So Romanelli should say, take the patio homes out. Put single family, but then they're gonna lose houses, so they're gonna lose money.
Well, from what you heard them say, is they're gonna come back and talk about a change. They're
Yeah,
talking
and that's
about
why I
additional
was
changes.
hoping to get to say something to them, like, you know, why don't you do
Oh.
this, or, you know, I mean, because we're still.
Pick up the phone and call them.
Call them.
You can call them.
You can call, and you can call them and ask them and request a meeting, and Mr. Olin sits down with many different people to talk to.
Okay, well, I didn't know, you know, I mean, you know, the rural residential, if you had farm residential 1 here, that would probably make everybody in here happy. Because all around this property, there are rural residentials, but they're on 1 acre, if you look, you know. So we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard spot going 2 acres lots, okay? Where the one in Berlin Township years ago, it was farm residential 1, and that's what they ended up having to stick to. The cheapest house over there is $1.6 million, and they didn't tear up any trees, you know, stuff like that. But the rural residential, you know, is a big step. It's hard to get somebody, you know, to build these houses on 2 acres. You know, I understand that, you know. But then when we're still sitting here looking at reach your arms across and tap on both windows at the same time, seems like they should kind of say, hey, these people don't like this, you know. And like you, the designs is beautiful. If it was Central Park, you know, New York or something, but I think that they ought to come back with something that you don't have 6-foot side yards. What, 8,200 square foot lots, you know? And when you guys were looking up there, back-to-back housing, I said, I know how to get rid of it. Just every lot that goes like that, make it 1 lot. As you take out that back-to-back, that would have solved that problem for us, but not for them, you know, and that's the whole deal. So the RR is going to be hard to bite, but I think if they came back with enough concessions, bigger lots, less.
So I'm gonna, we gotta stop
Okay.
talking about them.
Okay,
If you wanna have that conversation with them, call them.
all right, well,
Okay?
and who's the man that I need to talk to?
Jim Olin.
Jim?
Jim.
Okay.
Yep. He's the person to talk to.
All right, well,
Okay.
it's just, yeah, I'll give him a call. That's what I was looking at, is we're so far away that we'll give a little bit. If they give a little,
They've always been good, to my knowledge, they've always been good
Yeah.
to answer the phone
and I under
and
the
talk to
deal,
a neighbor of a property they're gonna own.
you know, I understand the deal, you know, boom, they've got a do so much with the houses or whatever, but a lot of that's, did they pay too much? But the other thing too, like you guys are noticing, none of this happens unless that sewer goes through. And if they don't have a pretty clear-cut way the sewer's getting there, I don't see how anybody can vote on it. But I appreciate it. I'll shut this off.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Anything else to discuss?
I emailed you out about the amendments being adopted, so at this point, I don't have anything else to add.
So what's our date? It's 30 days? 60
Oh,
days?
on the zoning resolution amendment, so the comp plan went into effect immediately. The zoning resolution will become effective barring any unforeseen referendum, May 20th. I am starting to, I have been working on, when time allows, drafting up every idea of zoning change that I can think of. It's substantial. I don't know if we probably won't do everything that I've written up. My plan, I got an email from Mr. Bernard. He sent some ideas today I'm gonna look over. I'll probably look it over and maybe send a response on that. If anyone else has anything you want to look at or just want to document, hey, this might be something we want to look at in the future, let me know. Happy to take it. My plan on that front, and I've sort of told the board and the trustees the same thing, and if I haven't, I mean to tell the BZA to also send me anything that they think of, because they obviously dabble in this too, obviously from a different angle. But I think at some point, now that I know who the chairman's going to be for the coming year, my plan is probably to sit down with Mr. Leff and sort of say, okay, here's absolutely everything I'm thinking of, or at least at a high level. And maybe, not that he's going to drive the ship, but at least I can start bouncing some stuff off of him, and he can sort of tell me, well, here's what I think works, here's what I don't think works, here's where I've got some concerns, here's what I think is too much, or maybe we want to divide and conquer how we do it. And then once he and I maybe get on sort of an idea of what we think might be a good idea, and then bring it to the commission as a whole, and then we can have that commission as a whole. So that's sort of my thought process, is sort of that building block. Because what I don't want to do is bring you like a really rough amendment draft with just a bunch of ideas, and then it gets out in the public, and then people get fired up, oh, they're gonna do all this stuff, when it's really just ideas on paper, but not actually a proposal. So I think that sort of gradual build-up will help with that. And also make sure we're not getting dragged down, and, I know we deal in the mundane weeds, but I just don't wanna spend a lot of meeting time on it until the chair and I are at least sort of on the same page of what we think is the right direction. I mean, if you want to see it, I'm happy to print out a copy, and you can come in my office and, I'll show it to you, or at least pull it up on my screen. I'd prefer, at this stage to keep it sort of in draft format, though.
I'm fine.
And it's always evolving too, so what it is tomorrow and what it will be a week from today, I may think of something completely different, decide to undo or do new stuff. So it's still very much a work in progress. No, it's still gonna be some time. I mean, I can sit down with you if you want to start talking about like what's taking this so long and what are you thinking, and maybe you don't want to spend so much time on this, let's concentrate on this instead, but.
What would be your timeline on this? Like, still when you want us to submit IDs for this?
I mean, really, whenever, as soon as you can, until we get to the point where we're actually ready to have substantive discussions about putting together something for initiation. I don't really have a timeline for that yet. The thing I feel like, there's a lot of stuff that staff feels like we could work on fixing that is candidly not stuff that this board deals with on a day-to-day basis. Stuff that you may not even see. It's not PRD. It's not, that kind of stuff. It's the everyday zoning enforcement kind of stuff that as we continue to administer, find this doesn't work, this doesn't work. We've even gotten some public comments from some of the residents about building heights and all that stuff you guys don't normally deal with too much. And to me, the biggest thing that I can think of for the benefit of the township is how we're classifying uses, what uses are allowed in which district, where they're gonna be conditional uses, and what the conditional uses standards are. That's honestly the bulk of what I'm trying to work on. defining what those uses are, figuring out what districts they should go in. If they're gonna be conditional, what are the conditional use standards? I mean, that is substantial work when
It's
you try
heavy
to.
lifting.
When you try to think of every possible use that could happen in the township, and you don't want to drill down too specific, but you don't want to leave it too broad, so you're trying to always, three bears it, trying to find the Goldilocks, what's exactly
We
right.
have, for non-conservation, I think it says 20 feet between 10,000 square houses. I think we don't have side setbacks for conservation PRD, correct?
Yeah, but that's by design.
Oh, okay.
That's so, because it was precluding this empty nester product that they like to put closer together, and we were getting a lot of divergences. Now, if we're saying we just don't want to see empty nester products that close together, yeah, we can do that. But one of the benefits of doing conservation development standards was always, the trade-off was you get more flexibility on setbacks and lot size.
I mean, something also, something someone brought up today is the farmland going away. Is there like other townships that like keep farmland? Like, do they zone them something special to keep them in the township?
Usually what it has to be is either outright purchased by some preservation program is generally either, and you gotta have, either the township has to have the money to do it, and then we buy it, and then we own it and have to maintain it. Or there's gotta be grant money that can be secured, or if like a third-party farmland preservation organization that had the funds to do it, could do it. I'm sure the state of Ohio probably has some programs. Now candidly, is Genoa Township where they're looking?
There is a program to try to help doing it at the state level.
But
There
nothing
is.
we have, what we have is large, I mean, this is track, I think, that we're talking about this evening, might still be actively farmed, but I mean, by and large, Genoa Township doesn't have farming going on. I mean, most of those programs are designed for true rural, I mean, I know we think of ourselves as rural, but I'm talking about, can't see a house for, a mile down the road, rural Ohio. I mean, that's further out than us
New
usually.
Albany bought a huge tract of land just to keep people from building houses on it because they don't want their schools to get overcrowded.
And it's good to be on New Albany and have that kind of income. So I mean,
Does happen.
sure, but it's just a matter of things cost money and the township
Then on the other hand,
resources are
Westerville
finite.
bought one because that was on discussion to have housing, and they ended up, it's gonna be more of a commerce park.
Oh, yeah.
So,
So
you
they
know,
still-
you have to be careful what you wish for, because you might get your wish and you might not like what you got.
And I really appreciated the farmland conversation because I mean, whether it's actively being farmed or whether it's just sort of, rural pastoral field, it's a very valid comment. And a lot of the reason we're seeing a lot of the development in our area and into these large tracts is because Genoa and other townships like Genoa decades ago also wanted low-density zoning and they had farmland and they were trying to keep their, so like, it almost, people are like, why does this keep happening? I can tell you the reason this keeps happening is because the mindset of, let's keep it low density, let's keep it spread out. It eats more land, it pushes out, it's just not an efficient use of land, so instead of doing 1,000 houses over this much land, you're doing 1,000 houses over this much land, and it just keeps pushing out, and, so at some point, someone's gonna have to densify in the region, and that will ease the pressure and cause, but not everyone's looking for obviously multi-story housing, but some are. But I mean, candidly, we're feeling the effects of probably zoning and land use practices that date back, to the 40s. The initiation of township zoning is, so we're trying to learn, and if we're trying to protect those areas, some of it is, and that's where where it's really tough, because you almost are talking about a regional solution, and that's not really something that's been terribly
What
successful.
Township is we've got good densities now, we've got good setbacks, and so if somebody comes in and just follows what's there, I mean, it's not, we're not sprawling, and, there is a call
But
for that.
to your part, we do have now, but I think there's a very large misunderstanding with people that don't have a history in working in and around zoning, that it can just be a vote. You can just arbitrarily say, I don't like what you're doing, I want you to have a bigger lot, and they don't understand that a lot of this is governed by the Ohio Revised Code, and that we have to stay within our rails. And that's, I mean, it's just like when, we ask to see things, but we don't govern it. Like we don't govern sewer, we don't govern traffic. We can't, you know, and I think there's a misunderstanding many times of that, and that's why I think we get some of the questions and concerns, because we as a zoning commission have to stay within our rails, and that's sometimes, you know, difficult.
I mean, again, I can probably almost guarantee you that if we went back and did the research, we could, and the minutes were written well enough, I'm sure they were having these exact same discussions about, let's keep Schrock Road and Westerville Road, or not Schrock, let's even, Morse Road and Westerville Road rural. I mean, you can go back and look at the historical aerial imagery in the 50s, Columbus, like,
When Columbus landed, it was all rural residential.
yeah, I mean, like, just north of campus.
Morse
I
and
mean,
Hamilton was
You can,
all
you can
farmland.
just, yeah, you can just
It's
follow,
important.
now, that's not saying we should just say, throw up our hands and say, oh, well,
Because you
it's
do-
just
but
gonna
you do have
happen,
to
so.
plan smart growth. You do
Yes,
have to
we
plan
wanna be
and not
smart and
hurt-
responsible.
Not hurt your
Yeah,
neighbors.
well, I mean, yeah, and it all, our township, like you say, is fairly well built out, because a lot of the townships around here have FR1, they have 5 acre, they do have 5 acre lots, and they have 2 acre lots, and, and there is a lot of that zone that way. Of course, people can ask for change in zoning, too.
And
but-
we had FR1 and they deleted it out of the code, gosh, early 90s. I mean, we're talking about 35 years ago. They had the foresight in Genoa to say, that's not what we are anymore.
Well, and even the last densities were above what they had historically been prior to 2017, 18, whatever it was, when all that stuff happened. I mean, we're higher, which shows that we are being, reasonable and understanding of, hey, things do change a little bit.
Which was why I was speaking to the fact that, our comp plan does recognize that PRD is an appropriate zoning district for this area
Right.
when done correctly.
Correctly.
Correct. So I think I've sort of beat that horse enough tonight.
And it's hard for the residents to
Yes.
understand it, because God knows it's hard enough for us to understand it.
Right.
And I'm
we
sure if
s-
you've
and we
lived somewhere
study
for,
it.
yeah, it's hard, especially, some of these people have lived here
I think it was
70
important
years,
to
that's hard.
clear up the misconceptions for them if we could today, because, it makes a difference. And I think
Absolutely.
with this setbacks and, the way Romanelli and Hughes does things, they look across the road and they may not even know there's subdivision over there.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, at some point, Romanelli Hughes may say, turn around and sell it, or give their options to somebody, sell their options to somebody else, depending on how they own the property.
Yeah.
And we end
And-
up not getting something near as nice.
Yeah.
Oh, and a bigger fight on our hands, yeah. But at this point, it seems like they're vested, and they certainly indicated that they're gonna take a look at what we had to say, which is great. So I think that's our job, to
We're doing our
negotiate
job.
and work on it.
Right.
We're very fortunate, we typically get developers who want to work with you. I can tell you that is not
No,
always
it's
the
not always
case.
the case.
Not
in other
always,
areas.
yeah.
Some townships are, I know it seems like it's really hard for us, but relatively speaking, we're fortunate in that aspect.
Yeah.
Chairman, would you like a
I
motion
would,
to
I would
adjourn?
love to have a motion.
I move to adjourn this meeting
Second.
at 10:07 PM.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right,
We get paid by the hour.
meeting done at